Welcome to Simplified UPSC by PPP, where we listen, learn, and grow together.
Welcome back to the Deep Dive. This is the show for you if you're looking to get genuinely well-informed, fast.
We take all of it, the dense policy docs, the complex science, the big legal rulings, and we boil it all down.
We give you the essential insights you actually need.
And today, we're really at a series of critical crossroads.
Yeah.
We're looking at situations where, governance, technology, and policy are all colliding.
Yeah, we've got constitutional law trying to figure out accountability.
We have the digital world forcing us to ask these huge questions about identity and finance.
And then there's this massive infrastructure push that's running right into a pretty serious green energy paradox.
The source material for this was really all over the map.
It really was. Everything from new Supreme Court rulings on family law and proposed constitutional amendments, all the way to global export rules that are just struggling to keep up with digital software.
And we even looked at the latest on the universe's expansion rate.
Our goal, as always, is to connect these dots for you.
So you don't just walk away knowing what happened, but really understanding why it matters for where things are headed.
Okay, let's unpack this. We're starting with some major constitutional drama. It's all about judicial innovation, holding ministers accountable, and that debate that just never goes away, reservation quotas.
Let's jump right in.
So we're opening with the courts and something you're calling judicial experimentalism. What's that about?
It's a really fascinating case, actually. It's about the Supreme Court's recent endorsement of some procedural directions for Section 498A.
Right. That's the provision on cruelty and dowry harassment. Now, Section 85 under the new BNS, the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita.
Exactly.
And this is such a critical issue, isn't it? Because 498A is one of those laws that's constantly debated.
It is. It's a vital shield for genuine victims. But the courts have also acknowledged for a long time that it can be, misused.
Weaponized, really, in bitter marital disputes.
Yes. So the question has always been, how do you protect the victim without letting the law become a tool for something else?
And what's the court's new experiment here?
So, in a 2025 decision, Shivangi Bansal versus Sahib Bansal, the Supreme Court backed what the Allahabad High Court did.
Okay.
And the core idea is a mandatory 2-month cooling period.
A cooling period.
Yes. Before any coercive action, like an arrest, can happen, the complaint has to be sent to a Family Welfare Committee, or FWC.
So just to break that down for you listening, the court is essentially hitting pause.
Right.
Using a procedural delay and these special committees to manage a really sensitive criminal complaint before the police get fully involved. The idea must be to encourage mediation, right?
Precisely. The judicial aim is to stop these premature arrests that can, completely destroy families. They want to prevent the law from being used as leverage in a divorce instead of a response to actual cruelty.
But isn't there a fundamental problem with this kind of judicial experimentalism? I mean, when courts start mandating 2-month delays and setting up new committees, aren't they basically legislating, stepping on Parliament's toes?
That is the central critique, and it's a powerful one. But the court's defense is that it has a history of stepping in when there's a legislative vacuum.
Right, when a law is causing systemic problems and nobody else is fixing it.
Exactly. Think back to the Vishaka Guidelines in 1997. The court created an entire framework for workplace sexual harassment because there was no law. It took 16 years for Parliament to legislate it.
Or the Prakash Singh case for police reforms.
Yes. In 2006, the court laid out sweeping reforms because of legislative inaction. This is part of that same pattern.
And we saw a version of this before with the Rajesh Sharma case in 2017 that also tried to set up these family welfare committees.
It did. But that faced a lot of backlash. Critics argued it diluted the law too much, and the Supreme Court had to modify those directions in 2018.
So this is like version 2.0. The court is learning from its mistakes.
In a way, yes. The Shivangi Bansal endorsement refines the idea. But the core tension is still there. You're balancing the good intention preventing misuse against the very real fear that a 2-month delay denies a victim swift justice.
It sends a signal, doesn't it? That the complaint isn't being taken with immediate seriousness.
It could. It's a judicial tightrope walk.
Yeah.
The court is trying to be statesmanlike, but it knows that any change to these protective laws has huge social consequences.
Okay, moving from the judiciary policing family law to the legislature trying to police the executive branch, this proposed 130th constitutional amendment bill.
This is a direct legislative shot at the problem of integrity in high office.
It definitely looks that way. The bill proposes something very, very specific.
A kind of automatic trigger.
Yeah, it says any minister, and that includes the prime minister and chief ministers, would be automatically removed from their job if they're held in custody for 30 consecutive days.
And this is for offenses punishable with 5 years or more in prison.
The concern they're addressing is obvious, I think.
It's completely legitimate.
Yeah.
How can the public trust a government when a senior minister is in jail for a month on serious charges?
Right. The current system relies on, what, political pressure? The party deciding what to do?
Which can easily be ignored. This bill wants to replace that ambiguity with a hard, unbreakable rule.
But this is where it gets really interesting. It seems like a good idea on the surface, but why is it facing so much criticism?
The criticism comes down to two huge constitutional risks.
Okay.
First, it completely bypasses the principle of due process.
So innocent until proven guilty is out the window.
Essentially, automatic removal based just on being in custody is a problem. Custody is pretrial detention. It's not a conviction. The bill equates the two.
It makes the act of detention the punishment itself.
Exactly. And the second risk is, frankly, massive. It's the risk of political manipulation.
You mean it could become a weapon?
Absolutely. Think about it.
Right.
In our hostile political landscape, this gives the executive that controls the police an incredible amount of power.
So a rival could orchestrate an arrest, make sure bail gets delayed?
And if they can keep a political opponent in custody for 30 straight days, boom, they're automatically out of office. It turns the criminal justice system into a tool for political vendetta. It's a way to destabilize elected governments.
So any real reform would have to be tied to something more concrete.
Something with more judicial safeguards. Maybe after charges are formally framed by a court, not just on the basis of an arrest.
So the 130th Amendment, it looks tough on corruption, but structurally it's just too risky.
It relies on a crude lever that is just right for abuse.
All right, let's shift to a constitutional debate that feels like it's always with us. The 50% reservation cap.
It's resurfaced again, hasn't it? Fueled by political demands for higher quotas, and also the Supreme Court looking at the creamy layer principle for SCs and STs.
This debate is so foundational. And that 50% number, it feels like law, but it's really just a judicial interpretation, isn't it?
It is, and it's rooted deep in the Constituent Assembly debates. Even B.R. Ambedkar, who was the fiercest advocate for affirmative action, argued that reservations had to be limited.
Why? What was his reasoning?
To preserve the right to equality of opportunity for everyone. His point was that if reservations took up the majority of public opportunities, then the promise of equality for all citizens would become meaningless.
And the courts picked up on that idea pretty early on?
They did. The key case was Balaji v. State of Mysore back in 1962.
Okay.
The Supreme Court said that while the Constitution allows for reservations, they must be reasonable. And here's the core logic. The court said reservations should not annihilate the principle of equality.
Meaning if they go over 50%, they stop being an exception and become the rule, undermining the fundamental right itself.
That's exactly the reasoning that cemented the 50% ceiling.
And the big Indrasani judgment in 1992 basically locked that in as a constitutional rule.
It did, but with an important little caveat. It said the cap could be breached in extraordinary circumstances.
And that's the battleground now. Political pressure from different groups is constantly pushing the courts to decide if today's demands count as extraordinary.
And at the same time, the court is looking inside the reservation system itself with this creamy layer question.
Right. So for you listening, what exactly is the creamy layer? And why is applying it to scheduled castes and scheduled tribes so controversial?
The creamy layer principle is simple in concept. It says that the more economically and socially advanced people within a reserved group should be excluded from the benefits.
The goal being to make sure the benefits get to the most disadvantaged members of that community.
Exactly, the poorest of the poor. It was first applied to OBCs, the other backward classes.
But applying it to SCs and STs is a whole other ballgame?
It is. Opponents argue that reservations for SCs and STs are not just about economic backwardness. They're about addressing historical, systemic, social exclusion untouchability.
So they're saying economic status is irrelevant to that history.
That's the argument. Proponents say applying the creamy layer is about fairness and making sure the policy achieves its goal. Opponents worry that it will weaken the community's overall representation and political voice. The Supreme Court's decision here will be huge.
Okay, let's move from constitutional identity to a more modern form of identity, our personal and commercial selves in the digital world. With generative AI, the fight over personality rights is really heating up.
This area of law is moving incredibly fast. And we need to be clear for you. Personality rights aren't just for famous people.
Right.
They are the legal rights that protect your identity, your name, your image, your voice, from being used for commercial gain without your permission.
And constitutionally, this comes from Article 21, the right to privacy and dignity.
Absolutely. Someone using your persona to sell something without your consent is a violation of your dignity.
The challenge here in India is that we don't have one single law for this, do we? It's kind of a patchwork.
That fragmentation is the key problem. AI is exploiting the gaps. The protections are scattered across really three main areas.
Okay, what are they?
First, you have the Copyright Act, which protects performers' rights. Then there's the Trademarks Act, where celebrities can trademark their names or catchphrases.
And the third one?
It's the most common one, a common law concept called the tort of passing off. It stops someone from using your identity to falsely imply you endorse their product.
And generative AI deepfakes, voice cloning, is forcing the courts to stitch these old ideas together into a new shield.
They've had to move very quickly. The courts have been aggressive. We saw the Delhi High Court protecting Aishwarya Rai Bachchan and Abhishek Bachchan,
Right.
issuing orders against AI-generated material using their likenesses. It sent a clear signal. Your digital identity is protected property.
And voice cloning is especially terrifying. AI can make it impossible to tell what's real.
The benchmark case here is Arijit Singh v. Audible Ventures from 2024. The Bombay High Court was crystal clear. Cloning a voice with AI for a song or an ad is a violation of the Copyright Act.
Because a performer's voice is their unique identity.
It's intrinsic to their persona. And the courts are also tackling deepfakes that just aim to damage a reputation, like in the Anil Kapoor and Jackie Shroff cases.
Yeah, in 2023 and 2024.
In those cases, the courts stepped in to protect their voices and personas from degrading, often sexualized deepfakes, and from being used on e-commerce sites.
They called it irreparable harm to their dignity.
And to their brand. But this is where the balance comes in. You have to protect these rights, but you also have to protect free speech under Article 19.1.
So where do the courts draw that line between protecting an image and allowing satire or art?
It's a constitutional tightrope. The line is usually drawn at commercial use. Parody, satire, news reporting, those are generally protected. What's prohibited is commercial exploitation, false endorsement, or creating malicious deepfakes just to harass someone.
It feels like the judiciary is sprinting to keep up, but we really need a single modern law that addresses AI head-on.
We do. Relying on 20th century ideas of copyright just won't cut it for much longer.
All right, let's pivot from protecting identity to using tech to make governance better. We're looking at a really cool model from Andhra Pradesh called ManaMitra.
This is a perfect example of what people call technological leapfrogging.
Using tech that's already everywhere to solve old problems.
Exactly. Using WhatsApp to bypass issues like digital illiteracy. The ManaMitra model is a powerful blueprint for what digital India could be.
So, practically, how does it work for someone, say, in a rural village?
The beauty is in its simplicity. Everything is built around one single WhatsApp number.
One number for everything.
One number. A citizen sends a message, gets a menu from a chatbot, and can access a whole range of government services, getting documents, paying taxes, you name it.
And the documents, like an income certificate, they get it instantly on WhatsApp.
Instantly. It just arrives in their chat as a digital file.
That cuts out so much bureaucracy, and I imagine it cuts down on corruption and fake documents, too.
That's a huge part of it. The focus is on trust. Almost everyone has a mobile phone and WhatsApp, so it empowers people who would never be able to navigate a complex government website.
And the trust comes from the verification.
Yes. Every document has a QR code that links back to the official government database, so it completely kills the market for fake certificates.
This sounds like something that should be rolled out nationwide, but what are the hurdles?
To go national, you need a few foundational things. First, you need legislative backing to make it official and secure.
Sure.
Second, it needs to be integrated with national platforms like DigiLocker for storage and UPI for payments.
And what about the big one? Cybersecurity. We're talking about putting a lot of citizen data through a foreign-owned platform like WhatsApp.
That's the critical challenge. The data is sensitive. To expand this, you'd need to mandate things like two-factor authentication and maybe even use blockchain for verification to make it tamper-proof. It works, but it needs a major security and legal upgrade to become a national system.
Okay, from a secure, centralized governance model to the complete opposite. The Wild West of decentralized finance, or DeFi.
DeFi is really the antithesis of traditional banking. It's a financial system built on the blockchain that operates without any of the usual intermediaries.
No banks, no brokers.
None. It uses automated smart contracts and what are called dApps, or decentralized apps, for peer-to-peer lending, investing, everything.
It sounds like it could democratize finance, which is a good thing. So what has regulators so worried?
Three things, really. Disintermediation, transparency, and the big one, anonymity.
So even though the transactions are on a public ledger,
The users themselves are basically anonymous. You don't need to do any know your customer or KYC checks to open a crypto wallet.
and that raises the big national security question. If the goal is financial inclusion, why are governments so concerned?
The anonymity is a massive alarm bell for terror financing and money laundering.
Because the money can move instantly across borders with no oversight.
Exactly. It creates a huge hole in the regulatory systems that are designed to track suspicious financial activity. It's a regulatory vacuum.
And this isn't just a theoretical problem, is it? We see these highly speculative tokens that pop up and raise questions about who's really behind them.
We do. And it highlights how difficult it is to apply our existing securities laws to these new kinds of decentralized assets. The entire ecosystem needs a new regulatory approach, one that can somehow bring in security measures without killing the innovation.
Let's shift now to the environment and infrastructure. And this is where you say we're seeing this green energy paradox in India.
It is a real paradox of building capacity but not being able to use it. The numbers on the success side are amazing. A 250% growth in renewable energy capacity between 2015 and 2021.
Wow.
And right now, today, we have about 44 gigawatts of renewable energy projects, solar, wind, that are completely ready to go. They're just sitting there, idle.
44 gigawatts. That's enough to power a medium-sized country.
It is.
So if the supply is ready, why is it stranded? This is the paradox.
The failure is on the demand side. Specifically, it's a policy failure. The bottleneck is the distribution companies, the discoms.
They're not buying the power.
They're extremely reluctant to sign long-term power purchase agreements, or PPAs, with the renewable developers.
And that's not because they don't like clean energy. It's an economic problem, right?
It's purely economic.
Yeah.
The discoms are often buried in debt, so they're forced to buy the absolute cheapest power they can find.
And while solar and wind are cheap, they're not always available.
Exactly. The moment you add storage batteries or pumped hydro to make it reliable 24/7, the cost shoots up
To what?
to between 6 and 9 rupees per unit, which just isn't competitive with coal.
So you have this bizarre situation where the supply side is ready to go, but the distribution side can't afford to buy the product.
And that's a policy failure. It also means stranded jobs. We talk about 35 million green jobs by 2030, but the sector that exists already has problems, like a huge gender gap. Women only hold about 11% of rooftops solar jobs.
So the paradox shows that building the tech is only half the story.
You have to build the policy links to make it financially viable. That's the missing piece.
And connected to this is the idea of recognizing cooling as a public health right.
This connects climate change directly to urban life. We know about urban heat islands.
Right.
The cities are a few degrees hotter than rural areas.
Right.
And India's cooling action plan from 2019 already aims to reduce cooling demand by up to 25% by 2038. But that's about efficiency. We need to connect it to protecting people's health.
So how are we doing that now? We have heat action plans or HAPs. How effective are they?
HAPs are essential, but they're limited. They focus on early warnings, setting up public cooling centers, and awareness campaigns, but they often lack enforcement, they're poorly funded, and they barely reach rural areas where agricultural workers are most vulnerable. They're reactive, not proactive.
So the policy needs to shift to treating cooling like access to clean water, a fundamental right.
Yes, and the focus has to be on what's called passive cooling built into our infrastructure.
What does that mean in practice?
It means things like mandating climate-resilient housing with good cross-ventilation, using reflective materials on roofs, strategic shading. It also means expanding heat shelters and guaranteeing cooling in schools and hospitals, especially for the poor.
And we're seeing some specific labor protections too, right?
We are. Telangana's rule mandating midday breaks for construction workers in the summer is a great example. It's policy reacting directly to climate extremes to protect the most vulnerable workers.
Shifting from energy to the raw materials for it, let's talk about securing the critical minerals for this green transition.
This is a huge strategic issue. India is incredibly dependent on imports for minerals like lithium, cobalt, nickel.
All the things you need for EV batteries and clean energy tech.
Exactly. So the government has approved a big 1,500 crore rupee critical mineral recycling scheme.
So, using what we already have to create a domestic supply chain.
That's the idea. It's a 6-year plan focused on leveraging our own urban and industrial scrap.
What kind of scrap are we talking about?
3 main things: e-waste from old electronics, lithium-ion battery scrap from phones and EVs, and catalytic converters from old cars.
And how does the scheme encourage this?
It offers financial incentives, like a 20% subsidy on new machinery and support for operating expenses. And importantly, a third of the money is specifically for small and new recyclers to build the industry from the ground up.
What's the target here? What kind of impact could this have?
The goals are ambitious. The scheme aims to create 270 kilotons of annual recycling capacity,
And that would yield how much in minerals?
about 40 kilotons of critical minerals per year, which would make a real dent in our import bill. It's also expected to create around 70,000 jobs. It's a really important move toward a circular economy.
Finally, in this segment, let's look at a massive piece of physical infrastructure, the Bairabi-Sairang rail line.
This is just a phenomenal achievement, both in engineering and strategy. It's given Mizoram's capital, Aizawl, direct rail connectivity for the very first time,
Which is a huge part of the Act East policy.
a key pillar of it. This 51-kilometer line connects Bairabi on the Assam border to Sairang, which is near Aizawl. It's a game changer.
The terrain in Mizoram is incredibly difficult, isn't it? Mountainous, seismically active.
It's some of the most challenging terrain in the country. This was an 8,000 crore rupee project. The numbers are staggering.
Go on.
It required 48 tunnels and 55 major bridges. And to give you a sense of the scale, there's one bridge, bridge number 196, that is 104 meters tall. It's 42 meters taller than the Qutb Minar. It's an absolute marvel of engineering.
Wow. And beyond just being an amazing feat, what does this mean for the region?
It's transformative. It dramatically cuts logistics costs and travel time. It ensures a reliable supply of essential goods, boosts trade, tourism, and access to services like healthcare. It physically and economically integrates India's eastern frontier with the rest of the country.
Okay, let's lift our gaze from the ground to the cosmos. What's the biggest mysteries in astronomy right now is something called the Hubble tension.
It's a problem that has been nagging cosmologists for years. It's basically a disagreement about how fast the universe is expanding.
The Hubble constant.
Right. When we measure it using data from the early universe, we get one number. When we measure it using things in the nearby or late universe, we get a different, faster number.
And this isn't a small difference. It's like 9%, right?
It is. And it suggests that either our entire model of the universe is wrong, or there's some brand new physics out there we don't know about.
So scientists are looking for new ways to measure it.
Constantly. And a new study led by IUCAA in India, which included a Nobel laureate, has provided a new anchor for this measurement, using a different kind of star.
Mirror variable stars.
Mirror variables, yes.
Okay, what are they and why are they a better standard candle for measuring cosmic distance?
So mirror variables are these cool, huge, pulsating, red, giant stars. Their brightness varies over really long periods, like hundreds of days.
And like other variable stars, the longer their pulse period, the brighter they are intrinsically.
That's the key. This period luminosity relationship lets them act as standard candles. But what makes them special is that their brightness is less affected by the amount of heavy elements in their host galaxy.
So they give you a cleaner, more reliable measurement.
A more robust one, yes. And using these stars, the team was able to measure the Hubble constant with 3.7% precision. It's a really crucial independent measurement that might help us finally solve the Hubble tension.
That's incredible. Okay, let's come back down to Earth and look at India's deep history.
We can start with Sarnath. It's one of the 4 holiest Buddhist sites, near Varanasi. It's revered as the place where the Buddha gave his very first sermon.
The turning of the wheel of Dharma.
The Dhammataka Siddha. Yes, it's where the Buddhist Sangha was officially born.
And its connection to the modern Indian state is very direct.
It is. Emperor Ashoka put up his famous lion capital pillar there, and that sculpture, the 4 lions back to back, was adopted as our state emblem on January 26, 1950.
So it's a powerful link across 2,500 years of history.
It is. And that heritage is now getting more global attention, like with the recent loan of the Vrindavani Vastra.
Tell us about this textile.
It's an amazing piece of art from the 16th century, a huge silk textile woven with scenes from Vaishnavite Bhakti mythology, mostly about Krishna. It originated in Assam.
And the British Museum, which has it, is loaning it back to Assam.
Yes, for an 18-month exhibition. It's a wonderful example of cultural diplomacy. It strengthens ties and promotes awareness of India's heritage.
And digging even deeper into the past, there's some exciting paleontology news from Jaisalmer, a potential phytosaur fossil.
This is really cool. A phytosaur was a large semi-aquatic reptile that looked a lot like a modern crocodile that wasn't closely related.
So what does finding one in the desert of Jaisalmer tell us?
It tells us that millions of years ago, during the late Triassic period, that entire region was a very different semi-aquatic environment. It gives us clues about ancient ecology and even continental drift.
All right, let's wrap up with our global context, looking at how international regulations are struggling to keep up with technology, specifically the Wassenaar arrangement.
The Wassenaar arrangement is this really important multilateral export control group. It has 42 member states, including India since 2017.
And its job is to control the export of conventional weapons and, crucially, dual-use technologies.
Right, things that have both civilian and military applications. The goal is to stop sensitive tech from falling into the wrong hands.
India has incorporated its control lists into our own national framework. But the digital age is causing huge problems for the arrangement.
That's the core challenge. The WA was designed for physical things. Hardware, equipment, it's struggling to regulate new digital tools.
Things like cloud services, software as a service models, and advanced digital surveillance tech.
Exactly. Intrusion software, cyber weapons.
Right.
How do you control the export of something that can be sent anywhere in the world with a click?
The old methods of border control are useless.
They're completely obsolete. This regulatory gap is a huge risk. It could allow for the rapid spread of powerful tools for cyber espionage and surveillance. The entire regime needs a radical overhaul to deal with the digital world.
This has been a really expansive deep dive. Let's try to summarize the 3 big thematic takeaways for you.
I think in governance, we really saw this delicate balancing act.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court is using judicial experimentalism to create safeguards like the cooling period for 498A. But at the same time, we see the risks of going too far with something like the 130th Amendment bill, which tries to replace due process with a simple mechanical rule.
And on the digital frontier, it's all about identity. We're trying to protect our personality rights from AI deepfakes while also using technology in amazing ways for governance, like the ManaMitra model in Andhra Pradesh.
And finally, with infrastructure, we saw this incredible engineering success, like the Bairabi-Sairang rail line, just a masterpiece. Yeah. But that success is sitting right next to the major policy failures that have created the green energy paradox, where we have all this capacity that we can't use.
So that leaves us with a final thought for you to consider.
It does. Our sources today show that India is brilliant at conceptualizing and building huge, complex things. A 104-meter-tall bridge, massive renewable energy parks.
The engineering is world-class.
It is. But the green energy paradox shows that building the capacity is only half the battle. The real nagging challenge is designing the policy linkages, the economic rules that connect that capacity to the people who need it. So the question to mull over is this: what kind of system is best equipped to solve these last-mile policy failures? Why does our policy ecosystem so often fail to match the ambition and the competence of our engineering ecosystem?
That is a great question. We hope you feel more informed and maybe a little more curious. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
We'll see you next time.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. This is the show where we take these really complex topics, policy, constitutional law, strategy, and we try to engineer them into sharp, instantly recalled knowledge.
Right. And we know your goal is to be quickly and thoroughly informed.
Exactly. So our mission today is to navigate 3, I think, crucial pillars that are really defining India's present and future. We're looking at the judicial balancing of fundamental rights, the hyper-speed transformation of public governance through digital, and then the critical shifts in its strategic defense posture.
And we're working from a whole stack of current affairs documents here, covering everything from judicial precedents all the way to these cutting-edge AI roadmaps and even maritime alliances.
So the idea is to give you, our listener, the analytical context.
And the clear connections that really bind these diverse topics together. We want to move beyond just the facts and dive straight into the implications of what's happening.
Okay, so it sounds like we're mapping the policy landscape. Let's lay out the terrain we're going to cover. First, we're starting with a massive debate that's unfolding in the Supreme Court right now.
And this one goes right to the heart of our constitutional setup. It's about fundamental rights and education.
Right, and then from there.
Then we'll do a sharp pivot into the digital world. We'll look at a really fascinating ground-level governance model from Andhra Pradesh called ManaMitra.
Oh, I've read about this one.
Yeah, and we'll link that to Niti Aayog's big, sweeping national strategy to position India as a global leader in artificial intelligence.
Okay. And to finish, we'll anchor this whole discussion in geopolitics and defense. We'll analyze how India is leveraging technology and deep regional partnership
Like the one with Mauritius, which is vital
to ensure its resilience in the Indian Ocean and, frankly, beyond. All right, let's unpack this constitutional clash first, because this really does cut right to the core of equality and autonomy in India.
It really does.
So when we look at this constitutional struggle, the tension, it really boils down to two specific articles.
Right. You've got the state's universal mandate under Article 21A on one hand.
And on the other, the minority protections of Article 30.
And this clash, it really embodies a foundational challenge. How do you balance the state's responsibility to ensure quality, compulsory education for every child
against the specific inherent right of minority groups to maintain their own institutional and cultural identity?
Precisely. So let's break down those rights just to be crystal clear. Article 21A. This was inserted into the Constitution, back in 2002 with the 86th Amendment.
And it's what operationalized the fundamental right to education, the RTE.
For all children between 6 and 14, this article is what empowers the state to make education mandatory, inclusive, and free. It's the constitutional backbone for everything we think of as universal access.
Okay, so that's one side of the coin. The other side is Article 30.
And Article 30 grants both religious and linguistic minorities the right to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice.
And that's not just about, starting a school. The key word there is administer.
It's everything. It's about having the autonomy to run it in a way that preserves and promotes the community's distinct character, its culture, its language.
So the flashpoint, the actual conflict, happens when the state tries to impose rules that come from Article 21A onto these institutions, protected by Article 30.
Yes, and the most contentious mechanism is that mandatory 25% reservation for children from economically weaker sections, or EWS, and disadvantaged groups.
Which is stipulated under the RTE Act.
Right. So the core constitutional question becomes, does mandating a quota, even for a very noble social goal like inclusion, does that fundamentally infringe upon a minority community's right to administer their own institutions?
Does it violate Article 30?
That's the question.
And this isn't a new tension. There's a really decisive judicial history here that we have to talk about, and it all centers on the 2014 Pramati Educational Society judgment. So tell us, why is this one ruling, which is almost a decade old, still the central piece of this entire debate?
Because the 2014 Pramati ruling, which was delivered by a 5-judge Constitution bench, it was decisive. It ruled that the provisions of the RTE Act, including that critical 25% quota, they do not apply to minority schools.
At all.
At all. It was a sweeping blanket exemption. It covered both aided schools, so government-funded ones, and unaided, the privately funded ones.
So if the court ruled so decisively back in 2014 and really prioritized the protections of Article 30, why didn't that just settle the issue? I mean, was the court's reasoning flawed, or did something else happen?
Well, the court's reasoning was legally sound within the framework of Article 30. Their argument was that enforcing these quotas would fundamentally alter the character of the administration of these schools.
Okay, that makes sense from a legal standpoint.
But, and this is the big but, the ruling created a significant regulatory and social gap. The fallout was immediate and, frankly, very predictable.
The spirit of inclusion under the RTE just got diluted.
Massively. Minority schools were now effectively exempt from the obligation to integrate children from economically weaker sections.
And I imagine beyond just the principle of inclusion, that exemption created a pretty glaring loophole, didn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It created a regulatory escape hatch. What you saw happening was that many non-minority schools, often very elite, high-fee private institutions, they started actively seeking minority status.
Just to get the exemption.
Exactly. Specifically to leverage this judicial exemption. By getting that minority tag, they could bypass not only the 25% quota, but also all the other critical compliance standards under the RTE Act.
Things like infrastructure, teacher qualification.
All of it. Basic physical norms. It undermined the entire standardization goal of the RTV.
So a ruling that was designed to protect autonomy ended up being used by what are essentially commercial enterprises just looking to escape regulation.
That's a perfect way to put it. And that dynamic seems to be what's driving this current judicial reexamination.
Okay, so what is the Supreme Court doing about it now?
The judiciary sees the deep social and policy vacuum that this blanket exemption created. So the Supreme Court has recently started to question the ongoing validity of that 2014 Pramati ruling.
And for you, listening, this is the crucial procedural update.
Yes. Because the 2014 decision came from a 5-judge Constitution bench, it can't just be overturned by a smaller bench of, say, 3 judges.
So what's the procedural requirement then? How do they revisit it?
The matter has been formally referred to the Chief Justice of India
To do what?
to constitute a larger bench. That means 5 judges or more, potentially 7 or even 9 judges. This procedural step alone signals how seriously the court intends to revisit and potentially modify or even entirely overturn that 2014 precedent.
The stakes are immense then.
Immense. The decision that comes out of this will redefine the balance between institutional privileges and the state's promise of inclusive, universal education for everyone.
Let's delve a bit deeper into the policy challenges that this legal ambiguity creates. I mean, beyond the immediate delay of just waiting for a larger bench to be formed.
The legal precedent delay, yeah.
Right. How do we actually propose solving the central tension here, the autonomy versus inclusivity problem?
Well, policy experts argue that we need to constitutionally clarify something very important, that the autonomy granted under Article 30 does not mean immunity from basic child-centric welfare standards.
That's a crucial distinction.
It's everything.
Yeah.
The argument is that autonomy should be protected when it comes to things like curriculum, language, the school's ethos, but not when it compromises the basic quality of the education a child receives.
Can you give us some examples of what those basic quality standards would be? The ones that policy experts say should apply universally regardless of minority status?
Certainly. We're talking about things like teacher qualification norms, making sure all instructors meet minimum training and expertise levels, and also infrastructure requirements. Things like classroom size, proper sanitation, essential facilities. These are standards meant to ensure a child's safety and their ability to learn effectively.
So they don't interfere with the administration's ethos, just the basic well-being of the child.
Exactly. The argument is that if a school can't meet these basic standards, it really shouldn't be operating, minority status or not.
That logic definitely holds up. But isn't there a risk that defining quality standards could become a kind of backdoor way for the state to infringe on that autonomy, especially if those standards are, financially difficult for a genuine, small minority institution to meet?
And that is the tightrope you have to walk. The standards have to be reasonable and geared toward welfare, not cultural assimilation. And this brings us to the most delicate part of the whole debate, the quota itself.
The 25% reservation.
Right. How can it be adapted to harmonize Article 30 with the spirit of 21A?
And that's really the crux of the proposed policy adaptation, isn't it?
It is. The adaptation suggests adjusting the quota mechanism. So instead of opening the 25% EWS quota immediately to the general population,
You change who gets first priority.
exactly, the state could mandate that these institutions prioritize disadvantaged children from the same minority community first. This addresses the needs of the community's own underprivileged members while still upholding the principle of economic inclusion.
Okay, let's analyze that proposal. What are the pros and cons of that specific idea?
Well, the main pro is that it respects the constitutional mandate of Article 30. It lets the minority institution primarily serve its own community, but at the same time, it fulfills the economic inclusion mandate of the RTE Act internally. It's an acknowledgement that not everyone in a minority community is rich.
Sure, what's the downside? The con?
The primary con is the audit challenge. I mean, how does the state accurately and effectively audit the economic criteria of children within a specific, often diverse community without being intrusive or, causing conflict?
And what if the quota isn't filled internally by that community?
That's the other problem. Does it then revert to the general EWS population? If so, you're right back at the original conflict. So this proposal, it really just moves the problem from a legal clash to a much more complex community management issue.
And this whole thing is playing out against a very charged social dimension. We can't forget the resistance from the institutions that, frankly, stand to lose their exclusivity.
That social resistance is powerful. The sources we have indicate that these established, well-resourced institutions, the ones often seen as elite, along with many of the parents who use those schools, they resist this idea of mandated socioeconomic mixing.
There's a resistance to the democratization of the classroom.
A palpable resistance, yes. This makes the whole debate profoundly political and socially sensitive. The final judicial decision, whatever it is, will be a deep test of India's constitutional morality and its commitment to, universal democratic socialization in its schools.
The goal being to ensure the child's right to an inclusive, quality education wins out over simple institutional privileges.
That's the hope.
Okay, a truly high-stakes debate. So just to reinforce that first segment for everyone listening, the memory hook is that tension between Article 30, minority autonomy, and Article 21A, universal education, and it's all encapsulated by the current judicial challenge to the 2014 Pramati ruling.
Absolutely. And now let's use that concept of inclusion and democratization as a kind of bridge. We've talked about the constitutional limits of inclusion. Now let's look at the technological tools being designed to actually deliver that inclusion.
Right. How are modern services actually reaching citizens on the ground far away from the benches of the Supreme Court?
Exactly.
Okay, the memory hook for this section couldn't be more modern. Governance on WhatsApp.
We are shifting from constitutional theory to hyper-local, high-speed digital service delivery, and the prime example is this Andhra Pradesh model called ManaMitra.
ManaMitra is a stellar case study in the evolution of what we call mobile governance, or MUM governance. Its real genius lies in its choice of platform.
Right. Instead of forcing citizens to download yet another government app
Or navigate some clunky web portal, they use a platform that is already everywhere in India.
WhatsApp. It's ubiquitous.
So let's talk about the strategic benefits of that, of relying on a platform that's so deeply integrated into people's daily lives already.
Well, the main benefit is accessibility and really zero friction. It lowers the barrier to entry so much. A citizen just interacts with a menu-driven chatbot through a single designated phone number.
And that design choice immediately solves issues of digital literacy and even device capability, since most basic smartphones can handle WhatsApp just fine.
It does. And the model is designed for mass scalability. It can handle lakhs of simultaneous service requests without needing a massive new investment in servers or app development.
So what's the breadth of services ManaMitra can actually provide? Is it just for basic information?
No, the functionality is surprisingly robust. It spans core government services. We're talking revenue, education, transport services like RTC, endowments, tourism, even tax payments.
And crucially, it focuses on instant document delivery.
That's the key. A citizen can request an income certificate, a caste certificate, or even their kids' exam hall tickets, and they get a verified digital copy instantly on their phone.
The immediate benefits of that, of instant digital document delivery, they seem massive, especially when you think about transparency and cutting down on corruption.
Oh, they're transformative. And the key is verification. The digital certificates they deliver are all QR coded.
And they link back to official government databases.
Instantly. So it virtually eliminates the possibility of fake documents, and it cuts out the middleman, the agent or the tout, who traditionally profited from bureaucratic delays and document fabrication.
For rural citizens, this must be revolutionary.
It is. This mobile-first approach means they can access critical services without traveling long distances or standing in queues for hours. It truly democratizes access to the state.
This model sounds like it was built from the ground up to be linked to the national digital public infrastructure. So what's the long-term vision for replicating this nationally?
The vision is to position platforms like ManaMitra as these key, localized delivery channels that all feed into the established national digital ecosystem.
Oh, so seamless integration with platforms we're already familiar with.
Exactly. With DigiLocker for secure, verified digital storage of all your documents, with UPI for instant payments for taxes and services, even with specialized systems like CoWin for health-related services.
So the end goal is a unified platform, accessible across the country, providing end-to-end trustworthy service delivery no matter where you are.
That's the dream.
But to get to that seamless national integration, the system needs massive technological robustness and especially security enhancements. We're talking about sensitive personal data here. What's needed for that next phase?
The sources all point to a necessary leap into frontier tech. To move beyond just simple menu selection and handle more complex, personalized queries, you need widespread deployment of sophisticated AI chatbots and voice bots.
Which is vital for predictive service delivery, right? Anticipating a citizen's needs?
And crucial for offering multilingual support to cater to India's incredible linguistic diversity.
And security is paramount. I mean, when the state is using a private global platform like WhatsApp, how do you ensure data integrity and prevent misuse?
The immediate requirements are all about strengthening cybersecurity. That means mandating two-factor authentication, 2FA, across all access points to protect citizen accounts.
Okay.
And furthermore, leveraging blockchain-backed verification for those instant digital certificates is essential to ensure their absolute integrity, to make sure they can't be tampered with after delivery.
And there's a non-technical piece too, I assume?
A huge one. Large-scale digital literacy drives that specifically target vulnerable populations, the elderly, women, marginalized groups, to make sure that adoption is secure and confident.
This successful localized governance model is a perfect transition to the broader national blueprint, NETI IOG's comprehensive roadmap for AI. It links this ground-level success to the big ambition of Viksit Bharat.
The shift is from a digital tool, which is mobile delivery, to a national strategic asset, which is AI. And India's ambition, which is called AI for all, isn't just about consuming AI developed elsewhere.
Right. It's about becoming a global production hub, the garage for AI applications.
Exactly. And crucially, this garage is focused specifically on solutions that are tailored for the developmental and socioeconomic challenges faced by the global South.
So it's about exporting not just software, but solutions to things like poverty, health access, agricultural inefficiency.
That's the idea. Prioritizing AI application on public good problems, not just purely commercial ones.
So what are the key areas, the sectors that NETI IOG has identified as the foundational pillars for that maximum public impact?
The roadmap identifies 5 foundational pillars for application: healthcare, agriculture, education, smart cities, and mobility.
And these are the areas where AI can generate the highest public return.
Precisely. For example, in healthcare, you could have AI driving predictive diagnostics and personalized medicine in rural clinics. In agriculture, you could have systems leveraging satellite data and weather patterns to give farmers these hyper-specific, timely advisories on sowing, irrigation, pest management.
Which would dramatically improve yields and reduce waste.
It could be a revolution.
That vision is highly compelling, but the reality of implementing it across a country as vast and diverse as India means you're going to confront massive challenges, both infrastructural and socioeconomic.
And those challenges are the speed bumps on the road to that Viksit Bharat goal. The first and most critical issue is what's called the adoption divide.
Right. While ManaMitra brings service to the mobile phone, advanced AI solutions are often expensive and require high-level technical skills to integrate.
And so the MSMEs, micro, small, and medium enterprises, which are the backbone of the economy, they may struggle to afford and deploy these sophisticated AI systems.
So if only large corporations can use AI, you risk widening socioeconomic inequality instead of bridging it.
It's a resource distribution problem, disguised as a technical problem.
So what are the specific ecosystem gaps that have to be urgently addressed to make sure this garage for AI vision doesn't just stall out?
We can categorize them into 3 structural gaps that the sources identify. First is talent shortages. India faces a critical need for highly specialized, high-end AI researchers who can push the boundaries of foundational models.
And also the applied AI professionals who can actually integrate these models into everyday public services.
Right. That talent pipeline needs aggressive and sustained investment.
Okay, that's gap 1. Gap 2 must concern the raw material for AI, the data itself.
Exactly. The second gap is a fragmented data ecosystem. For AI to function ethically and equitably, it needs massive, clean, standardized data sets. Right now, data often exists in these institutional or sectoral silos. It's poorly documented, lacks uniformity.
So we urgently need standardized, privacy-compliant, sectoral data sharing frameworks.
We do. To unlock the potential of AI across those 5 pillars without compromising citizen data rights.
And the third gap relates to the sheer physical power needed to run all this, the compute infrastructure.
That's the bottleneck. We have persistent shortages of high-performance GPUs, the graphical processing units, those specialized chips that are essential for training and running large AI models.
And beyond just the chips, the ambition of deploying AI nationwide requires what are called edge cloud networks, right?
Yes. These are localized computing systems that process data closer to where it's generated, what they call the edge, so village health center or a sensor on a farm.
And the lack of robust edge cloud networks just slows everything down.
It slows down large-scale, decentralized deployment, leading to latency and inefficiency in crucial real-time applications. Addressing these 3 gaps, talent, data, and compute, is fundamental to realizing that AI for all vision.
So whether we're talking about constitutional law or digital governance, the challenge is really the same, ensuring that advancements are inclusive and that the necessary infrastructure, be it legal, social, or technological, is actually in place to support the ambition.
That's a great summary.
Okay, now let's pivot entirely and look outward. How is India ensuring its strategic resilience and its physical security in the middle of rising geopolitical competition?
A critical question.
Our connection hook here is the idea of strategic security, and we're encapsulating that with the phrase Mauritius and the geopolitical anchor. The sources really underscore that India's strategic vision relies not just on domestic tech advancement, but also on cultivating deep, future-ready regional alliances.
And we start with that critical, long-standing relationship between India and Mauritius.
This partnership is so much more than just a cultural affinity, though that's obviously the foundation.
It is. I mean, over 68% of the Mauritian population is of Indian origin, which facilitates this incredibly deep people-to-people and diplomatic trust. But critically, the relationship has evolved from just a traditional partnership into a comprehensive, future-ready strategic alliance.
And strategically, what defines the cooperation now? It seems to be driven by very material projects.
It is. The core areas of cooperation include major infrastructure initiatives. You see it in the funding for the M4 motorway, and critically, the redevelopment of Port Louis.
And upgrading Port Louis is essential for Mauritius's position as a regional maritime hub.
Absolutely. And beyond infrastructure, the cooperation spans health, education, and extensive defense support, providing Coast Guard vessels, Dornier aircraft, and capacity building through training programs.
So why is Mauritius considered such a vital anchor for India's regional security apparatus, particularly in the Indian Ocean?
Its geopolitical importance is simply non-negotiable. Mauritius is located near critical SLOC lanes of communication.
The essential shipping arteries for global trade, especially energy.
That's right. So maintaining a close partnership with Mauritius is vital for enhancing India's maritime domain awareness, its ability to monitor and survey activity across this massive oceanic space.
So a trusted partner like Mauritius directly helps India project security and counter the influence of rivals in the region.
It does. It provides a platform for intelligence sharing, for logistical support. Plus, it acts as a trusted gateway to the African continent and is a key partner in multilateral forums like the Indian Ocean Rim Association or IORA.
So it's a mix of soft power through diaspora diplomacy and training and hard security needs. And this regional anchoring is only effective if it's backed by credible deterrence, which brings us to India's indigenous defense leap.
This is where India is really demonstrating the technological maturity of its strategic deterrence capabilities. And the standout development here is the next-generation, nuclear-capable intermediate-range ballistic missile, the Agni Prime or Agni-P.
We've seen the Agni series evolve over decades. What makes Agni-P a breakthrough in operational terms?
The breakthrough isn't just in the missile's technology itself, but in its deployment readiness. Agni-P was successfully test-fired from a rail-based mobile launcher.
And that shifts it from a fixed or even a simple road mobile system to something much more flexible and survivable.
Exactly.
Help us understand why rail mobility is such a massive leap forward for strategic deterrence.
Okay, so in nuclear doctrine, mobility is synonymous with survivability. This is especially true for a nation like India, which is committed to a no-first-use policy. That requires a robust second strike capability.
You have to be able to survive the first hit.
You do. And a rail-based system, which is also canisterized, meaning the missile is sealed, protected, and ready to fire inside a robust container, can be moved very quickly across the country's vast railway network.
Which makes it incredibly hard for an adversary to target.
Dramatically harder than road mobile systems or fixed silos. It gives the Strategic Forces Command immense operational flexibility and ensures that India's strategic deterrent remains credible and protected. This capability places India among a very select group of nations globally.
Shifting from the future of deterrence to the recent history of air power, we have to acknowledge a really profound and symbolic moment for the Indian Air Force.
A true end of an era.
The retirement of a real workhorse.
Indeed. The era of the Soviet-designed MiG-21 has formally concluded after 6 decades of service with the IAF. The last 2 active squadrons, No. 23 Panthers and No. 3 Cobras, have been retired.
60 years. That is an exceptional service life for a supersonic fighter. What was its historical significance, even when you consider the later controversies?
The MiG-21 was transformative for its time. It was inducted in 1963 as the IAF's first truly supersonic jet, and it fundamentally altered India's air superiority capabilities.
It played a key role in the 65 conflict, the 71 Bangladesh Liberation War,
and the 1999 Kargil conflict. Its operational legacy is immense. But we do have to acknowledge the controversy. The sources highlight its high crash rate, which sadly led to over 500 accidents and more than 170 pilot fatalities over its lifespan.
Earning it that grim nickname, the Flying Coffin.
It did. Its retirement is deeply symbolic. It represents a determined shift toward modern, largely indigenous platforms like the Tejas.
And that push toward indigenous platforms is also fueling India's growing ambition to be a defense exporter, not just an importer.
This is a cornerstone of the Atmanirbhar Bharat vision for defense. And that ambition was made tangible with the inauguration of India's first overseas defense manufacturing facility in Bertid, Morocco.
That's a major strategic move. Why Morocco specifically?
Morocco serves as a strategic hub. It's a gateway to North and West Africa. Establishing a joint production and export hub there signals India's intent to move decisively up the global defense value chain.
So creating partnerships that facilitate not just sales, but joint manufacturing and shared export opportunities with trusted partners in the global south.
That's the long-term goal.
And finally, India is continuing its complex balancing act on the global stage, which is evidenced by its participation in multilateral military exercises.
That continuous engagement is highlighted by India's expected participation in exercise Zapad 2025. This is a multilateral exercise hosted by Russia, focusing on high-intensity conventional warfare and multinational counterterrorism operations.
And India's continued involvement there underscores its commitment to maintaining strategic autonomy.
Right. It's about maintaining interoperability and strategic learning across diverse geopolitical alignments.
And just to tie strategic infrastructure back to the Act East policy, we should mention that monumental railway project completion in the Northeast.
Oh, that is a crucial link between national strategy and regional integration. The inauguration of the Bairabi-Sairang railway line finally gives Mizoram's capital, Aizawl, direct broad-gauge rail connectivity.
This was a massive, technically complex project.
Incredibly complex. An investment of around 8,000 crore, 48 tunnels, and one bridge, bridge number 196, stands 104 meters tall. That's 42 meters higher than the Qutub Minar.
And that logistical achievement, it drastically reduces transport costs and boosts trade.
It does. And it's a key physical component of the Act East policy, enhancing connectivity and economic integration with Southeast Asia.
That brings us full circle. A really comprehensive view of the challenges and the advancements defining the Indian state today, from the legal foundations that define individual identity
To the digital infrastructure that delivers state services.
and the strategic capabilities that secure the nation's interests.
A lot to cover.
This deep dive has woven together threads of legal precedent, technological adoption, and geopolitical strategy. For you, the listener, we hope these connections provide the insight you need for that sharp recall.
We covered that profound constitutional challenge, the judiciary wrestling with Article 30 versus Article 21A, the key point being that while minority autonomy is protected, it can't become immunity from essential child-centric quality standards.
And the resolution now hinges on the Supreme Court's willingness to convene that larger bench and reestablish the balance.
Then we dove into the hyperscale potential of digital governance with our memory hook of governance on WhatsApp. Platforms like ManaMitra successfully leverage common commercial tech to achieve transparency and instant service.
And that ambition is scaled nationally by Niti Aayog's AI for All strategy, which, as we discussed, still faces those critical gaps in talent, data standardization, and computing power.
And finally, we looked at India's strategic resilience, anchored by that India-Mauritius partnership in the Indian Ocean, and reinforced by high-tech advancements like the highly survivable rail-based Agni Prime missile, which cements India's strategic deterrence.
Now that we've synthesized all this complex material, let's leave you with one final critical thought that really bridges the digital governance models we discussed with that fundamental framework of rights.
We highlighted the incredible success and scalability of India's digital public infrastructure, ManaMitra, CoIN, UPI. These platforms deliver efficiency and inclusion, but many, like ManaMitra, rely heavily on proprietary mobile technology or private global platforms.
Platforms like WhatsApp, Google, or proprietary cloud services, which are ultimately controlled outside the state's direct purview. And this raises a critical and, I think, provocative question. Given that India's vision is to become the garage for AI and build the future of governance, what is the ultimate long-term cost to democratic accountability, to data integrity, and to national sovereignty if this essential public infrastructure is constructed upon digital foundations that we, as a nation, do not entirely control?
That reliance on external proprietary technology is the next frontier you have to explore in connecting these strategic and digital dots.
Food for thought indeed. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We hope this analysis helps you turn information into immediate insight.
We look forward to diving deeper with you next time. Okay, let's unpack this. Welcome back to the deep dive. Our mission today is a pretty high-yield extraction from some key documents that are really setting the course for the economy. We're trying to synthesize these really complex policy announcements, some geopolitical moves in trade, and the data that holds it all up.
We really are. We're focusing today on the absolute bedrock of economic stability and hopefully growth. We're looking at this balancing act, right, between the traditional pillars, things like how tariffs are hitting local factories and how we even collect farm data, and these hyper-modern challenges.
Like securing critical minerals.
Exactly. Securing critical mineral supply chains, mastering next-gen tech. And for you listening, you really need to understand how all these things are moving at the same time to get the full policy picture.
We've pulled together sources that, they really span the gamut, from the high-level politics of WTO negotiations right down to the very real challenges facing a single groundnut exporter. We're going to distill those high-value nuggets for you.
And if we connect this to the bigger picture, this is exactly the kind of synthesis that's essential for understanding governance now and predicting where policy is headed.
So by the end of this, you'll have the critical context and the data points you need to really articulate what's driving India's economic strategy, not just the headlines.
We've structured this around three main areas. First, the macroeconomics, global trade, taxation. Second, we'll get into agriculture and the blue economy data, quality, resilience. And finally, the industrial race for critical minerals and the deep tech of the future.
That's a perfect roadmap. So let's start with the money matters in Section 1, macroeconomic shifts in trade and taxation. Starting at home, let's talk about the tax structure. We saw a pretty major evolution of the goods and services tax framework, what the government is calling GST 2.0. It rolled out on September 22nd, 2025. But what's really interesting here is the name they gave it.
Right. The Prime Minister coined it the GST Bachat Utsav.
The Festival of Savings.
Exactly. And that framing is deeply deliberate. It's not just political spin. It's a strategic move to position this update as a consumer benefit, an evolution meant to simplify things rather than, just another tax measure.
So even though our sources don't detail the specific rate changes, like whether something moved from 18% down to 12%, the naming itself tells a story.
It signals a shift in the policy priority itself. When GST first rolled out, the whole focus was structural, right? It was about moving from this incredibly fragmented indirect tax system to one unified one, a massive, heavy lift.
So what's the structural goal behind this 2.0 version then? Is it just about perception?
I think the intent is more about optimization and efficiency. The focus seems to be on easing the compliance burden, especially for small and medium businesses. When you hear 2.0, it often implies things like integrating AI tools for automated checks, maybe simplifying the return filing process.
Making it easier to claim input tax credits.
Yes, exactly. Enhancing the ITC matching system to cut down on fraudulent claims, which in turn helps formalize the whole supply chain. By calling it a festival of savings, they're hoping the reduced cost of compliance for businesses will kind of, smooth over any resistance to the technical changes. It's about reinforcing GST as a positive reform 7 years on.
That communication strategy really does seem as important as the technical changes. Okay, let's move from domestic tax to global trade, where there's always this persistent friction around tariffs. India has often been labeled the tariff king, especially by the U.S.
That label, it's indicative of a really fundamental policy disagreement between India and many developed economies. It highlights that age-old debate, protectionism versus rapid industrialization.
The classic playbook, isn't it?
It is. Historically, any economy trying to build up its domestic manufacturing capacity uses higher tariffs to shield its new industries from powerful global competition. It's a standard tool in the industrial policy kit.
So what are the actual real-world consequences of a label like Tariff King? Is it just rhetoric?
Oh, it has very direct consequences. It leads to escalation. When a major trading partner like the US uses that kind of language, it basically provides the political justification for retaliatory measures.
Which we've seen.
Which we've seen specifically in the US imposing 50% tariffs on a whole range of Indian goods. And look, a 50% tariff isn't a small adjustment. That essentially walls off a major export market for those producers.
Instantly uncompetitive.
Instantly. It drives their costs up in the US. They can't compete with exporters from other countries. And that forces policymakers in India into this really precarious balancing act, you know? How do you protect your own industries without kicking off a full-blown trade war that cuts you off from the very markets you need? It's intense pressure. Hashtag BWTO dynamics and global trade equity.
This tension you're describing, it leads us perfectly into the multilateral arena, to the World Trade Organization, and there we saw something genuinely monumental happen with China.
Yes, China's announcement about the special and differential treatment provisions, the S&DT.
And what's fascinating here is how subtle the signal was, but how huge the implications are.
That's right. China announced it will no longer seek new S&DT provisions. Now, that's not a complete abandonment of their current status, but it is a very clear signal that they're stepping toward graduation. They're accepting their role as a major economic power, which helps reduce some of that friction with the U.S. and the EU.
But before we dig into the implications of that, let's just define S&DT clearly. What exactly does this give developing nations?
Okay, so S&DT provisions are basically special rights that are baked into the WTO agreements. They're designed to recognize that developing nations, and especially least developed countries, or LDCs, face structural disadvantages. In practice, it means three main things.
Okay.
One, they get much longer transition periods to implement complex agreements. Two, they often have softer obligations overall. And three, they get preferential treatment from developed nations, usually through things like the GSP, the Generalized System of Preferences, which means lower or zero duties on their exports.
It sounds like a really necessary mechanism for fairness, but its use has become this massive sticking point at the WTO. Why is it so contentious?
The contention really comes down to how it's declared. See, LDCs, the poorest countries, are clearly defined by the UN based on objective criteria. But for S&DT purposes, developing nation status is largely self-declared.
So a member can just decide for itself.
Pretty much. And that mechanism has been, let's say, maximized by some very rapidly growing economies.
Which is exactly why the developed world has been pressuring countries like China and India to step away from it. They argue they've outgrown the need.
Precisely. The argument is that when your economy becomes the second largest in the world, like China's, and you account for a huge slice of global trade, your continued use of these provisions distorts competition. It undermines the whole spirit of the system.
So when China makes this move, even a subtle one about not seeking new provisions, it puts a spotlight on everyone else.
It puts immense pressure on other large emerging economies. India, Brazil, South Africa. The global narrative immediately shifts to, well, if China, the biggest beneficiary, is willing to move on, why aren't you?
How does this change the game for India in future WTO negotiations?
It makes those negotiations much, much harder, instantly. Think about agricultural subsidies. Developed nations have been targeting the big subsidies offered by countries like India and China for years. Now, with China taking a step back, the focus can shift almost entirely onto India's subsidies.
So the negotiating space for India has just shrunk.
Considerably. On new issues, too, like digital trade or environmental measures, India will face intense scrutiny if it tries to claim S&DT exemptions where China has already yielded.
All right, shifting from the rules of trade to, well, the financing of the infrastructure needed to trade. A huge need for any developing economy. We're talking about an almost unimaginable need for capital here. The sources confirm it's a $2 trillion infrastructure investment needed by 2030. That's not something you can cover with domestic tax revenue.
No. Absolutely not. That scale of funding, it just can't be managed by state budgets alone. The solution has to involve mobilizing global private capital. And the specific mechanism we're seeing for this is the UK-India Infrastructure Financing Bridge, or UKFB.
Launched in September 2024.
Right. It's a crucial bilateral initiative between Niti Aayog and the City of London Corporation. You can think of it as a pipeline, basically, designed to channel that patient, long-term global investment into India's sustainable infrastructure projects. Green ports, renewable energy grids, you name it.
And it's not just about the money, is it? It's about making these projects appealing to, frankly, skeptical international investors.
That is the UKFB's defining feature. A big pension fund from, say, Canada, or Japan is hesitant to invest if a project's viability is based on local, often opaque standards. The UKB aims to align Indian project procurement with global best practices. And our sources specifically mention the UK's five-case model.
Okay, we have to unpack that. What is the five-case model? Why does adopting it suddenly make an Indian project so much more credible?
It's a comprehensive, internationally recognized framework for building a strong business case for public investment. It just forces the planning to be incredibly holistic and robust. The five cases are strategic, economic, commercial, financial, and management.
Let's quickly go through them.
Sure. The strategic case is, does this project align with national goals? The economic case. Does it offer the best value for public money? The commercial case. Is it a viable commercial deal? Are the risks properly allocated? The financial case is simply, is the funding secure and affordable? And finally, the management case. Is the project actually deliverable? Are the governance and monitoring structures in place?
So by committing to this framework, India is essentially creating a universal language for these complex projects.
A universal translation mechanism, exactly. It reassures global investors that the viability and financial standards meet a very high, predictable international benchmark.
But I have to ask, isn't that a very Western framework, developed for mature, maybe low-corruption environments? How hard is it to integrate that kind of detailed planning into the existing Indian bureaucratic cycles?
That is the core challenge. You're absolutely right. And it speaks to the institutional reforms that have to happen for the UKIFB to work. It won't be a seamless copy-paste job. It's going to require intensive capacity building.
Why do it?
The incentive is enormous. To meet that $2 trillion goal, you need stable, long-term debt and equity. And that capital simply will not show up unless the risk assessment is robust. So the UKIFB is less about the money the UK gives directly and more about the quality assurance stamp it provides to attract capital from everywhere else.
That gives us a really solid context for the macro finance side. Let's pivot now for Section 2 and look at the foundation of the economy, agriculture.
Right, moving from the flow of global capital down to the ground reality of India's food systems. And here, resilience is being built not just by growing more stuff, but by gathering precise data, maintaining very high-quality standards, and expanding into new areas like the blue economy.
And it all starts with knowing what's actually happening on the ground, which means surveys. Which brings us to the National Statistical Office, the NSO, #tag measuring rural economics through surveys.
The upcoming NSO surveys, scheduled for July 2026 to June 2027, are just critically important. They basically reset the baseline for all policy decisions for the next 5 years. They are the new map of the rural economy, and we should focus on the two big ones.
Let's start with the first one, ADIS, the All India Debt and Investment Survey. What's its job? What data is it collecting that's so vital?
ADIS is the nation's premier source for household finance data. It's a massive undertaking. It provides a comprehensive picture of indebtedness, assets, and investments in both rural and urban areas. For policymakers, the key data points are things like the extent of non-institutional debt. So, money owed to moneylenders, the distribution of assets, changes in savings patterns. It's the best tool we have for mapping wealth inequality and financial vulnerability.
And the second one, the SS, or Situation Assessment Survey. That's tailored specifically for agriculture.
That's right, the STAS targets agricultural households. And crucially, that includes not just landowners, but also landless households who rely on farm labor. It collects all the operational metrics you need for good farm policy. Land holding sizes, machinery ownership, tech adoption rates like drip irrigation, access to bank loans, insurance uptake, all of it.
It sounds like an absolute logistical nightmare, surveying millions of fragmented farms. Why is this data so indispensable that the government invests so much in these long, expensive surveys?
Because without this granular data, policy becomes a guessing game. Think about a scheme like PM Kisan, the direct income support. To target it properly and see if it's even working, NEI Aayog needs the SAS data to know who qualifies as a farm household and what their income looks like.
So it's the foundation for everything.
It's the essential foundation.
Right.
The 80s data informs things like targeted loan waiver schemes. These surveys are literally used to calculate the share of agriculture in our national accounts and to inform decisions on things like minimum support prices. Without them, you're flying blind. #TagDay-B. Quality, nutrition, and export challenges.
And this push for quality data is linked directly to the need for quality produce, especially for exports. We have a perfect and unfortunate example of this. Indonesia is suspending groundnut imports from India.
Yes, This trade rejection just throws a spotlight on the immediate economic danger of aflatoxin contamination. Indonesia raised the red flag, and now India is scrambling. Aflatoxins are they're toxic metabolites produced by certain fungi, Aspergillus flavus and Parasiticus.
And they thrive in hot, humid conditions.
Exactly, which are prevalent in India, especially during harvest or storage. It affects groundnuts, maize, chilies.
And this isn't just an economic threat, it's a public health hazard, too.
Absolutely. The economic risk is huge. High-value markets like the EU have non-negotiable standards. They might limit aflatoxin to something like 4 parts per billion. A shipment that fails that test is rejected, probably destroyed, and it does severe reputational damage.
And the health risk.
The health risk is more insidious. Aflatoxin is a potent carcinogen, and worse, a metabolite called aflatoxin M1 can pass into the milk of livestock that eat contaminated feed, which is a particular danger for infants. So the policy response has to cover everything from post-harvest management to developing fungus-resistant crops.
This focus on quality really reinforces that broader national policy shift away from just cereal security, just counting tons of wheat and rice, and towards a more holistic nutritional security.
That pivot is absolutely crucial for addressing what they call hidden hunger micronutrient deficiencies. And the big focus right now is on millets, or nutri-cereals. This is being formalized through some major schemes.
Okay, can you detail those for us? What's the mechanism behind this big push for millets?
Well, there are 2 main ones. You have the long-running National Food Security Mission for Millets, the NFSM, which gives financial support to states. But then you have the newer Sri Anna mission. It's a 6-year mission launched in 2023, and it's much more comprehensive. It covers R&D, building a supply chain, processing facilities, and a big branding push.
Policy is one thing, but getting people to actually change their diet is a huge challenge.
It is. It requires clever nudges at the state level. And Karnataka's Kshira Bhagya program is a fantastic case study here. They successfully integrated millets into the meals provided in their school programs.
Which does a few things at once.
It does. It improves nutrition for kids, it gets a new generation familiar with and accepting of millets, and most importantly, it creates a stable, predictable market. That gives farmers the confidence to shift away from water-guzzling crops like rice. #CUC, diversifying into the blue economy.
Moving beyond the land, the policy focus is also expanded in a big way into the blue economy, our marine resources and fisheries.
This is a massive frontier for growth. The key development here is a partnership between India's Department of Fisheries and the UN's Food and Agriculture Organization, the FAO. The goal is to fundamentally transform traditional fishing harbors into world-class blue ports.
What does that mean in practice? We're talking about more than just a new concrete dock, I assume.
Oh, much more. We're talking about deep technological integration. The deployment of IoT devices, sensor networks, data analytics for real-time monitoring of catches, vessel movements, cold chain logistics. Environmentally, the design mandates eco-friendly infrastructure solar power, efficient cold storage, sophisticated waste treatment to reduce marine pollution.
And there's a strong social component to the design as well, which is often an afterthought.
A crucial one. The design explicitly mandates women-friendly infrastructure, recognizing the huge role women play in fish processing and marketing. So, dedicated sanitation, processing halls, secure storage. It's about making sure the modernization benefits everyone.
And which harbors have been selected as the pilots for this? It's a nearly 370 crore rupee investment.
The 3 pilot harbors chosen strategically are Vanakbura in Diu, Jakhau in Gujarat, and Karaikal in Puducherry. They'll serve as the models for future modernization efforts across the coastline, proving the concept that this tech integration can boost economic output while also protecting the environment.
And finally, you have to make sure the benefits of all this actually flow back to the producers, which means strengthening institutions.
That's the last piece of the puzzle. The National Cooperative Exports Limited, or NCLL, has signed a critical MOU with APIDA. NCL brings the collective strength of India's cooperatives, and APIDA provides the marketing and quality assurance support. It's a structure designed to give the primary producer a direct line to global markets.
That gives us a really comprehensive picture of resilience, from the microscopic threat of a fungus to the massive overhaul of our coastal infrastructure. Okay, for Section 3, let's get into the high-stakes industrial race where resource security meets deep tech. So we've laid the groundwork of finance and food. Now let's dive into the technological inputs India needs to become a global manufacturing powerhouse, and this all hinges on securing the raw materials of the future.
Resource security is the new geopolitical bottleneck. It really is. Our dependence on critical minerals, lithium, cobalt, rare earths, is probably the single greatest vulnerability in the green energy transition. Domestic mining is a long-term prospect. So in the near term, recycling is the only real insurance policy. Hashtag ES. Securing the clean energy supply chain.
And the government has formalized this with a pretty substantial scheme under the National Critical Mineral Mission. Tell us about the financial commitment here.
The Union Cabinet approved a significant Euro 1,500 crore scheme specifically for promoting critical mineral recycling. And it's not a short-term fix. It's a targeted initiative that runs for 6 years, from 2025 all the way through 2031. The main goal is supply chain resilience.
What specific waste streams are being prioritized? Where are they hoping to get these minerals from?
The focus is on the high-value, complex stuff, primarily end-of-life lithium-ion battery scrap, bulk e-waste, so phones, computers, and catalytic converters, which have platinum group metals. The goals are incredibly ambitious. The scheme aims to build 270 kilotons of annual recycling capacity.
And what's the expected yield from that?
About 40 kilotons of recovered critical minerals every year. And they project that this level of capacity will attract something like 8,000 crore in private investment.
Okay, so 1,500 crore from the government is the seed money. But how is it structured to get private companies to overcome the huge cost of setting up these sophisticated recycling plants?
They're using a dual incentive structure to de-risk it. First, there's a 20% capital subsidy on the cost of the plant and machinery. That lowers the entry barrier significantly. Second, and this is crucial, there's an operating expense, or OPEX, subsidy that's linked to the plant's incremental sales.
So it rewards growth and efficiency.
Exactly. It helps ensure profitability once you're up and running. And importantly, the scheme reserves 1/3 of the money for small and new recyclers, trying to prevent the whole ecosystem from being dominated by a few big players right out of the gate.
This feels like a very proactive approach to a future problem. But at the same time, we're seeing a parallel issue in a traditional material. The aluminum sector is facing huge problems.
This is the paradox of industrial transition, isn't it? India has significant bauxite reserves. We have an installed aluminum capacity of 3 million tons a year. But the industry is under severe stress. Actual utilization is only about 1.2 million tons.
So less than half. Why is there such a massive underutilization in an industry that should be a slam dunk for us?
They're being hit by two forces at once. Domestically, there's a huge structural shift happening in construction. Aluminum, which used to be dominant for window frames and doors, is rapidly being replaced by UPVC plastic.
Because it's cheaper.
It's often cheaper to install, it has better thermal insulation, so demand is falling. And externally, the industry is struggling to compete against a flood of cheap imports, mostly from ASEAN countries, coming in under our free trade agreements with little to no duty.
So local producers who face high energy costs just can't compete on price.
They can't. And if you look at the per capita consumption data, it just drives the point home. India's per capita aluminum consumption is shockingly low, around 4 kilograms.
What's the global average?
The world average is about 11 kilograms. China is at 25. This low consumption shows a massive missed industrial opportunity because aluminum is crucial for everything downstream: automotive, aerospace, packaging. It's a major bottleneck. Hashtag B, the quantum leap into 2D materials.
All right, let's pivot from a struggling traditional metal to the absolute cutting edge of materials science. We need to introduce the listener to what's driving the next wave of computing: 2D materials.
This is a genuine quantum leap in technology. We're moving beyond the physical limits of silicon-based chips. 2D materials, graphene is the most famous one, but also things like molybdenum disulfide or MAIOs and this new family called xenes are defined by being just one single atom thick.
One atom thick. It's hard to even imagine. Why are they seen as the foundation for the next generation of chips?
Because traditional silicon chips are hitting a physical wall. As transistors get smaller, they leak current, they overheat. It's a huge problem. 2D materials, because they're so thin, can control the flow of electrons with much greater precision. This lets you build transistors that are smaller, faster, and run with much less power and heat.
And graphene is the poster child for this.
It is. A single layer of carbon atoms, it carries electricity better than copper and disperses heat with incredible efficiency. And their physical properties are almost unbelievable. Graphene is about 200 times stronger than steel, but it's still flexible and transparent.
Which opens up applications for flexible electronics, smart windows, things we see in sci-fi movies.
Exactly. But the real game changer is in the quantum realm. Their unique structure at the atomic scale allows them to host and manipulate quantum phenomena.
So they can host qubits, the building blocks of quantum computers?
They can. And crucially, certain 2D materials exhibit really exotic quantum behaviors, like hosting something called non-abelian anyons, which is a theoretical concept that's foundational for building fault-tolerant quantum computers. And fault tolerance is the holy grail. If India can master these materials, it puts them at the absolute cutting edge.
And this R&D push is directly linked to that bigger industrial goal of becoming a product nation, not just an assembly nation. Why is this so essential for avoiding technological dependence down the line?
Look, the global semiconductor industry is dominated by a tiny handful of players. The US, Taiwan, South Korea. India can't win by just trying to replicate 20th century silicon tech. By investing heavily in 2D materials R&D now, it's an attempt to get ahead of the next technology cycle. If you own the core intellectual property and manufacturing technique for these foundational materials, you can dictate terms in the future. It's a move from dependence to strategic leadership.
That brings us to our final review of this incredibly dense dive. It really shows the parallel tracks India is trying to run on. #outro. This deep dive has really illustrated the concurrent and often contradictory battles being fought across the economy. You've got stabilizing the tax base with GST 2.0. You've got asserting trade rights at the WTO while China changes the game. And you have this internal fight for resource security.
Right, whether that's maintaining food quality against the aflatoxin threat or proactively funding critical mineral recycling, it's happening on every level.
And we've highlighted how those foundational policy tools are the scaffolding for all of it. The NSO surveys, 80s, and SAS, providing the essential data for governance. The UKI fee, strategically attracting that stable global capital needed for that massive $2 trillion infrastructure goal.
What's truly fascinating, I think, is the tension we identified. This effort to modernize physical infrastructure, like the blue ports, and traditional sectors, like the struggling aluminum industry, while at the very same time pouring immense resources into revolutionizing the input materials themselves, like the race for 2D materials.
It's an attempt to run a high-speed tech race while simultaneously fixing foundational, decades-old structural problems.
Which raises an important question, and it's one for you, the listener, to really think about as you synthesize all this. The biggest challenge for India's economy is not generating big ideas. It's not securing high-tech patents or funding massive projects. It's ensuring that the benefits from this highly centralized, cutting-edge technology, like a new 2D material patent, can be successfully diffused and adopted by the vast, fragmented agricultural sector and that struggling traditional industrial base we discussed.
How do you manage that multi-track evolution inclusively?
Exactly. How do you make sure the quantum leap at the top doesn't leave the majority of the traditional economy too far behind? That integration, that diffusion of progress, that is the real test of policy effectiveness and the absolute key to sustainable high growth.
An essential and very complex thought to end on. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the technology, agriculture, and finance that form the strategic backbone of the economy.
Welcome back to the deep dive, customized just for you. Today, we're jumping right into a really detailed exploration of the critical nexus of environment and science. We've synthesized a whole range of sources to pull out the key concepts, the species, and some surprising facts that are really shaping policy and innovation right now.
And our mission today is to move beyond just the headlines. We want to provide the analytical context for why a new tiger reserve approval or a complex idea like paleoclimatology actually matters.
Exactly. If you're looking for that comprehensive shortcut to being genuinely well-informed on these topics, this is your deep dive.
It is.
Our roadmap is going to be pretty packed. We'll start with some rare good news actual conservation successes and powerful global protocols.
Before pivoting to some of the tougher topics, we'll look at fast-acting climate threats, like these mini cloud bursts, and a really frustrating energy paradox that India is dealing with right now.
And then we'll cap it all off with some breakthroughs in natural medicine, ancient geological finds, and some massive infrastructure projects.
It's a real study in contrast, isn't it? You've got these incredible localized successes right alongside these huge systemic challenges.
So where do we start?
Let's start with what works. That brings us to our first section, conservation and international climate pacts.
Okay, let's unpack this. It's always great to talk about measurable conservation wins. We're looking at two big ones here, one that's very local to India and another that's a global success story.
That's right. And maybe a good way for you to remember this section is just New TR and Montreal success.
New TR as in New Tiger Reserve.
Exactly. And the success of the Montreal Protocol.
Yeah.
So let's start with that local win. A really significant milestone, both administratively and ecologically.
Okay.
The National Tiger Conservation Authority, the NTCA, has officially approved the upgrade of the Debrigar Wildlife Sanctuary.
And that's in Western Odisha, right?
In Western Odisha, yes. It's now officially India's newest tiger reserve.
And that's more than just a title change, I assume. This designation carries real weight.
Oh, absolutely. It's not a symbolic gesture at all. It means Debrigar gets placed under the highest level of conservation protection and, crucially, resource allocation in the entire country.
So what makes Debrigar so special? Why this sanctuary? We hear about reserves being these dense forests, but I understand Debrigar is, well, it's ecologically unique.
It is exceptionally unique. The ecosystem is described as amphoterrestrial.
Amphoterrestrial, what does that actually mean?
It means it's this critical convergence zone. You have 3 distinct habitats: forests, grasslands, and really significant wetlands, all coming together.
Ah, okay.
And that blend supports a much higher, more varied level of biodiversity than you'd get in a single type habitat.
And it also includes a major wetland, doesn't it?
It does. The Ramsar-tagged Hirakuda wetland is part of it. And that's just vital for migratory birds and all sorts of aquatic life, which, provides this continuous, diverse prey base for the apex predator, the tiger.
The story of how this reserve came to be is what really stands out, though. It wasn't some sudden top-down decision. This is being called a major success story, which means there must be metrics showing real health improvements.
There are. The evidence is compelling.
So what are we looking at? What convinced the NTCA that this was working?
Well, the most foundational point is that the entire transformation has been overwhelmingly community-led. But if you look at the ecology, they have a demonstrable expansion of the prey base.
Which is the foundation of the whole food chain.
The absolute foundation. And you're seeing significant population growth in large herbivores, like the gaur. The sources actually point to a massive 40% rise in newborn animal herds.
40%. That's a staggering number.
It's huge. And when you see a number like that, it tells you the ecosystem isn't just stable. It's actively flourishing. It's recovering its reproductive health.
That 40% figure is amazing, especially when you think about how hard it is to get local communities to buy into conservation, which can, restrict how they use their land.
Yeah.
So what was the mechanism here? Why did community participation work so well in Debrigar when we've seen it fail in so many other places?
I think that's the most critical part of this whole model.
Yeah.
Historically, you've had this conflict between forest administrations and local communities.
Of course.
Here, they replaced that with a voluntary participatory approach. We're talking about 400 families voluntarily relocating from the core area.
Voluntarily, that's the key word.
With comprehensive, well-structured rehabilitation packages. But even more importantly, 155 of the surrounding villages are now formally engaged as conservation partners.
So they have a stake in the outcome.
Exactly. They benefit directly from the protection programs, from the economic activities that spring up around it. They're not just being policed, they're owners of the success. And that builds real resilience.
And building on that local engagement, the reserve has this incredible ecotourism idea that's directly tied to the ecosystem's health. I read it's becoming India's first dark sky tourism hub.
It's a brilliant innovation.
Tell us about that. What does that mean?
A dark sky designation means they actively work to mitigate light pollution. The main goal is to preserve the nocturnal environment, which is perfect for things like stargazing facilities.
So it's a unique tourist draw.
It's a unique, high-value offering. It complements the daytime activities, the kayaking on the wetlands, the cycling trails, the birding.
Right, and the birding must be incredible there.
Over 300 bird species, with 120 of them being migratory. But by controlling the light pollution, you're also protecting nocturnal animals and those migratory patterns. So the tourism revenue becomes directly tied to maintaining the ecological integrity that people came to see in the first place. It's a virtuous cycle.
From a local triumph to global governance, let's shift gears now to the Montreal Protocol. It's often held up as the gold standard for environmental treaties, famous for saving the ozone layer. But its role today in fighting climate change is, well, it's a lot less understood.
The Montreal Protocol is a true anomaly in international relations. It is the only UN treaty to be universally ratified by all 198 member states.
Every single one.
Every single one. Its original mandate was razor sharp. Phase out ozone-depleting substances, mainly CFCs, chlorofluorocarbons.
But the climate fight has sort of co-opted its structure.
It has, very successfully. The key mechanism is something called the Kigali Amendment, which was adopted back in 2016. And this shifts the protocol's focus to an entirely different class of pollutant.
And that class would be hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs. We need to be crystal clear on this distinction. Why are HFCs the target now, and why do they fall under an ozone treaty if they don't actually damage the ozone layer?
That is the essential insight you need to have. HFCs were brought in to replace CFCs in things like air conditioners and refrigerators, specifically because they met the original mandate.
Okay.
They don't have chlorine or bromine, so they don't deplete the stratospheric ozone layer. But, and this is the huge but, they pose a monumental risk to the climate.
Because they're greenhouse gases.
Immensely potent greenhouse gases. We put them in a category called short-lived climate pollutants, or SLCPs, and that's a crucial term to remember.
Okay, let's break that down. SLCPs. This explains the urgency.
Yeah.
What exactly defines a short-lived climate pollutant?
SLCPs, this group includes HFCs, methane, black carbon, and tropospheric ozone, are defined by their relatively short residence time in the atmosphere.
How short is short?
We're talking anywhere from a few days for black carbon up to maybe a decade or so for some HFCs. This is in sharp contrast to carbon dioxide, CO2, which can linger for centuries.
But during that short lifespan, they pack a bigger punch.
An extremely high punch. They have a very high global warming potential, or GWP. On a mass-to-mass basis, they can be hundreds or even thousands of times more powerful at trapping heat than CO2.
So if CO2 is the long-term structural problem that needs these deep, sustained cuts over decades, what does targeting SLCPs like HFCs get us?
It gets us the single fastest way to curb near-term global warming.
Because they disappear so quickly.
Exactly, because they dissipate quickly. Cutting their emissions gives you immediate, high-leverage cooling benefits, like within our lifetime. So by targeting HFCs with the Kigali Amendment, the world is using the Montreal Protocol's proven machinery, its funding structures, its inspection regimes to fight climate change and to do it fast. It's a brilliant piece of geopolitical infrastructure reuse.
And we see this global pact being integrated right into domestic policy. You mentioned India's Cooling Action Plan, or ICPAT. How does ICP bring the goals of Kigali down to the national level?
ICK was launched in 2019, and it's basically India's national blueprint for moving away from these high GWP refrigerants. It's aiming for a huge 20 to 25% reduction in cooling demand by 2037-38.
And that's not just about swapping out chemicals in air conditioners.
Not at all. It's a holistic approach. It's about focusing on energy efficiency in appliances. It's about better building codes to reduce the need for cooling in the first place. And it's about expanding the cold chain with efficient tech. It's a coordinated national plan that delivers on an international promise.
So the big takeaway here is the power of the mechanism. You take a functional global framework that was built for ozone, and you repurpose it to get these immediate, high-leverage wins against our most potent, short-lived climate threats.
And that's a perfect transition from policy successes to the threats themselves. We're now looking at elements that are fast-acting, high-impact, and represent some really acute dangers.
And a good memory hook here might be fast and furious pollutants, but maybe focus more broadly on rapid onset climate problems.
Yes, exactly. Let's start with an immediate localized weather danger.
When we talk about climate change, I think the public often pictures these big, slow, generational shifts. But the real devastation often comes from smaller, faster, hyper-localized events. And the India Meteorological Department, the IMD, has been trying to clarify this.
That's right. The IMD recently put out a statement noting that while they don't see a rising trend in what we'd call major cloudbursts.
And how do they define a major one?
Conventionally, that's extremely high rainfall, 10 centimeters or more in a single hour.
Right.
So they're not seeing more of those. But they are definitely seeing an increase in the number of what they're calling mini cloudbursts.
Okay, so let's define the mini cloudburst. What's the specific criteria the IMD is using for this?
A mini cloudburst is a sudden, very concentrated rainfall event. The definition is 5 centimeters of rain or more in 1 hour, and it happens over a very small geographic area, typically just 20 to 30 square kilometers.
And what's the mechanism causing more of them? Is it just general warming?
It's a fundamental principle of thermodynamics. Warmer air can hold exponentially more moisture. So as the atmosphere warms, you get this increased moisture loading. This leads to highly localized, intense convection, where a massive amount of water vapor condenses and just drops violently over a tiny area.
Now, why does this mini label matter so much, particularly in a place with Himalayan geography? The rainfall amount is technically lower than a major cloudburst, but the danger seems to be higher.
The terrain is the amplifying factor. It's all about the terrain. In the Himalayas or other mountainous areas, you have what's called orographic influence.
Orographic influence.
Think of the mountain as a giant wall. When these warm, moist air masses hit that barrier, they're forced to rise very quickly.
And as the air rises, it cools.
It cools rapidly, which causes that massive amount of moisture it's holding to condense almost instantly. This drastically intensifies the rainfall on the windward side of the mountain.
So the ground, the soil, the infrastructure, it's all hit with this sudden, concentrated blast of water. And that's often made worse by things like deforestation.
Precisely. In these fragile Himalayan regions, the soil often has a reduced capacity to absorb water, so even rainfall of just 2 to 5 centimeters per hour is enough to completely overwhelm the local hydrological system.
And that triggers a cascade.
An immediate cascading set of hazards. You get devastating flash floods, catastrophic landslides, and severe infrastructure collapse, especially to roads and bridges. These mini cloudbursts cause immediate and severe loss of life, crops, and property.
And they place a huge strain on disaster preparedness, right, because they're so unpredictable.
Enormous strain. Local policies are generally designed for larger, more predictable weather systems. The real challenge is trying to anticipate the micro-locations where these events are going to happen.
Let's pivot now from a meteorological threat to an economic one. It's a fundamental contradiction at the heart of India's energy transition, what our sources are calling the green energy paradox.
It is a paradox.
How can a country that's so focused on rapid green growth be facing a paradox? What's the core contradiction here?
The contradiction is incredibly stark. India has a significant amount of renewable energy capacity. We're talking specifically 44 gigawatts of utility-scale solar and wind projects.
44 gigawatts. That's a huge number.
It's roughly the total installed capacity of some mid-sized European countries. And this capacity is fully built, it's ready for deployment, and yet it remains entirely stranded.
Stranded, you mean it's not connected to the grid?
It's not able to connect or sell power, it's just sitting there, idle.
44 gigawatts of clean, ready-to-go power sitting idle. It seems profoundly illogical, especially given the country's energy needs. If the supply side is built, what's the structural barrier?
The issue is fundamentally on the demand side, and it's financial. It comes down to a critical lack of signed power purchase agreements, or PPAs.
So the developers built the power plants, but no one's agreeing to buy the electricity.
Exactly. They built the supply based on policy signals from the government, but the state-owned distribution companies, the discoms, are hesitant to commit to buying that power long-term.
And that hesitation is driven by cost.
It's all about economics, specifically the cost of making intermittent power reliable.
Right, the storage problem. You need massive storage batteries or pumped hydro to smooth out the fact that the sun doesn't always shine and the wind doesn't always blow. How does that translate into a price barrier?
The cost of that storage integration is, right now, prohibitively high. When you add battery-based or pumped hydro storage technology, the final cost of that electricity, the tariff, it jumps substantially.
How high are we talking?
You're looking at tariffs for reliable renewable power between 6.6 and 9 rupees per unit.
Wow. And how does that compare to coal?
It's just not competitive. The discoms have established low-risk, long-term contracts for coal power that often guarantee a rate in the range of 3 to 4 rupees per unit.
So for a financially fragile state utility, the choice is between power at 3 rupees or power at 9.
It's an economic necessity for them, and that's what creates the paradox. The green power is there, but it's too expensive to be reliable.
So the challenge isn't the technology or the generation capacity, it's the financing and the cost of reliability. What is the government doing to try and bridge this massive financial gap? I see mentions of things like PLI and VGF.
The government is attacking the cost problem from 2 different directions. First, you have the production-linked incentive, or PLI scheme.
And that's about manufacturing.
Exactly. It targets domestic manufacturing. The government gives financial incentives, basically a direct subsidy, that's tied to increases in domestic output of things like solar modules and battery cells. The goal is to build economies of scale, reduce reliance on imports, and therefore organically lower the capital cost of the technology itself.
And the second lever, viability gap funding.
Viability gap funding, VGF, is a much more direct subsidy. It's essentially a one-time grant given to a renewable energy project developer.
To do what exactly?
To bridge the gap between the actual cost of their project and the price that utilities are willing to pay for the power. This funding lowers the developer's initial capital cost, which means they can then quote a lower tariff.
And a lower tariff helps them secure those crucial PPAs.
That's the theory. It's all designed to make this high-cost, reliable, renewable power artificially competitive with cheap coal to try and unlock that stranded 44 GW and push India towards its 2047 green energy goals.
Given that all of this clean energy tech, the EVs, the batteries, the storage, is so reliant on materials like lithium, cobalt, nickel, let's talk about long-term economic security. India's making a proactive move on critical minerals.
This is a really crucial strategic step. It's all about resource resilience and building a circular economy. The Union Cabinet just approved a 1,500 crore rupee scheme under the National Critical Mineral Mission.
And what's the rationale behind it?
The thinking acknowledges a global reality. Securing these minerals through traditional mining is slow, it's expensive, and it's geopolitically very complex. So until domestic mining exploration, which is a very long-term project, starts to yield results, recycling acts as this vital, near-term, secure domestic supply bridge.
So this is a 6-year scheme. What specific waste streams are they targeting to build this recycling ecosystem?
The scheme runs from 2025-26 to 2030-31, and it's intensely focused on developing scalable processes for 3 key feedstock areas.
Okay, what are they?
First is general e-waste, which is full of precious metals and rare earths. Second, and this is the most critical one for the energy transition, is lithium-ion battery scrap.
From EVs and grid storage.
Exactly. And third, they're targeting catalytic converters from end-of-life vehicles, which are rich in platinum group metals like platinum, palladium, and rhodium. Recovering these is technologically complex, so the investment is needed.
It sounds like this isn't just about collecting trash. It's about standing up a massive high-tech industry. What are the projected outputs from this investment?
The projected impact is transformative for the domestic supply chain. The scheme is expected to create 270 kilotons of annual recycling capacity.
And that will yield how much in actual minerals?
It should yield about 40 kilotons of critical minerals annually, which will significantly reduce dependence on volatile international markets.
And what about the economic impact? Jobs? Investment?
The goal is to attract around 8,000 crore rupees in private investment and to generate something like 70,000 direct and indirect jobs across the whole chain: collection, processing, and refining. It's a critical strategic move to make sure a lack of raw materials doesn't throttle India's green manufacturing ambitions.
All right, let's move from economic policy to scientific innovation. Our next segment is on cutting-edge research, and we're starting with a breakthrough from traditional medicine that tackles one of modern healthcare's biggest threats.
This is a fascinating story.
We hear so much about the crisis of antimicrobial resistance, AMR. This is the whole superbugs phenomenon, right? Bacteria evolving to resist our drugs.
It is. It's a crisis that threatens to undo a century of medical progress. So finding new antimicrobial compounds is an absolute priority. And sometimes, the best answers are found in traditional knowledge systems, which can then be revalidated by modern science.
And in this case, the source of that innovation is the red ivy plant.
That's right.
So tell us about this plant. Locally, it's known as Morikudi-pacha.
Yes. Its scientific name is Strobilanthes alternata. It's a red-green, vine-like plant you find a lot in moist, biodiverse forests, like in Kerala's Western Ghats.
And local healers have been using it for a long time.
For centuries, they've used it primarily to treat external cuts, bruises, skin infections, all because of its empirically proven wound-healing properties. They knew it worked.
But the breakthrough here is moving from "we know it works" to isolating the specific chemistry. What is the key bioactive compound they found?
Researchers managed to isolate the specific compound responsible for its healing power. It's called actioside.
Actioside.
And rigorous modern testing has proven it has 3 critical properties that all work together. It's a potent antioxidant, it's anti-inflammatory, and crucially, for the AMR fight, it has confirmed broad-spectrum antimicrobial properties.
So it can actively inhibit the growth of pathogenic microbes.
And potentially even some of the drug-resistant strains.
This is a perfect example of what they call translational science, isn't it? Taking that traditional wisdom and turning it into a scalable, modern solution. What's the actual product that came out of this research?
The isolation and formulation of actioside led directly to the development of a cost-effective, easily scalable, and importantly, a biodegradable wound pad.
Ah, so it addresses environmental concerns too.
Exactly. It uses the compound's enhanced healing capabilities while also tackling the problem of medical waste. It's just a fantastic showcase of the untapped potential within indigenous medicine to help solve these huge global health challenges.
From cutting-edge health science, let's take a massive leap back in time, millions of years back into paleontology. We've got news of a significant fossil discovery in Jaisalmer, Rajasthan.
Yes, this has sparked immense excitement in the geological community. Ancient fossilized remains were found in Mega Village, and the initial findings suggest the specimen is a phytosaur.
Okay, before we get into the find itself, let's define the organism. What exactly is a phytosaur?
Phytosaurs were extinct, large, semi-aquatic reptiles. Superficially, they looked a lot like modern crocodiles. They were heavily armored, had these long, imposing snouts.
But they're not actually related to crocodiles.
Not directly, no. A key difference is the position of their nostrils. In phytosaurs, the nostrils are up on top of the skull, near the eyes, not at the tip of the snout like a croc.
And what does that tell us?
It points to a specialized adaptation, probably for submerging most of their body while waiting for prey, with just their eyes and nostrils above the water.
And when did these creatures live, and why is finding one in Rajasthan so significant?
They were the dominant apex predators during the late Triassic period, so that's roughly 237 to 201 million years ago. Finding the specimen in what is now the Thar Desert adds so much to the existing fossil record of the region.
Which already includes dinosaurs, right?
Yes. Confirmed dinosaur and marine fossils have been found nearby. So this suggests that this area, which is now so arid, was once a vibrant, semi-aquatic delta or a massive freshwater ecosystem millions and millions of years ago. It's a powerful reminder of how transient our geography really is.
What do we know about the actual remains they found?
The specimen is pretty substantial, estimated at around 6 to 7 feet long, with a visible, well-preserved spine. What really fascinates paleontologists about phytosaurs is the diversity of their snout shapes, which tells us about their diet.
So different snouts for different prey.
Exactly. Some were long and slender, specialized for catching fish. Others were robust and short-snouted, likely for hunting terrestrial animals that came to the water's edge. And then you had high-snouted generalists. Analyzing the snout of this specimen will provide critical clues about the specific ecosystem that supported it.
Let's connect that deep past to the near present. India is pushing to elevate its geological heritage on the global stage.
That's right. 7 new natural heritage sites from India have just been added to UNESCO's tentative list, and they really highlight the unique geological processes that have shaped the subcontinent.
We should definitely spotlight 2 of the most distinct sites. Let's start with the St. Mary's Island cluster in Karnataka. The defining feature there sounds incredible.
It is genuinely spectacular. St. Mary's Island is famous for its rare, columnar basaltic rock formations.
These are the ones that look like giant geometric pillars, right?
Exactly. Distinct, vertical, multi-sided columns, often hexagonal, that look like they were carved by a machine. They're the result of volcanic activity from the late Cretaceous period about 85 million years ago.
What's the mechanism that creates those perfect shapes?
They form when basaltic lava cools and contracts extremely rapidly after erupting. The rapid cooling causes stress fractures that propagate inward from the surface, creating those uniform vertical patterns.
And why is that significant geologically?
These formations are crucial geological markers. They offer direct physical evidence of the immense volcanic activity and continental rifting that happened when the Indian plate broke away from the supercontinent Gondwana and started its rapid journey north toward Asia.
And the second site, Aramati-Dibbalu in Andhra Pradesh, is a totally different kind of geological archive.
Completely different. Aramati-Dibbalu literally means red earthen mounds. There are these unique formations of reddish sand, silt, and clay that stretch for about 12 kilometers along the coast.
And the red color comes from oxidation.
Natural oxidation of iron compounds over millennia. Geologically, they're quite young, formed during the late Quaternary Age over the last 2.6 million years.
So why do these mounds have such a high scientific value?
They are critical natural climate archives. They're essential for the field of paleoclimatology.
Because the sediments were laid down in layers over time.
Precisely. So those layers hold proxies, chemical, biological, geological signals that researchers can analyze to reconstruct past environmental conditions. They could use them to trace patterns of sea level change, shifting coastlines, and most crucially, the evolution and intensity of the South Asian monsoon system over vast timescales.
So they're basically a physical history book of our climate.
That's a perfect way to put it. And what makes them even more important is their rarity. The sources note that only 2 other such formations are known in the entire world, one in Sri Lanka and one in Tamil Nadu. That makes Aramati-Dibbalu an invaluable site for understanding our regional climate history.
Okay, let's ground our discussion back in the present-day geography, looking at the vital river systems of northern India and the huge infrastructure projects being built to overcome geographical challenges.
We can start with the Himalayan river system, specifically the Bees and the Sept.
The context here is rising water levels and erosion, which are posing a severe threat to villages in Punjab right now. It's a reminder of the power and volatility of these rivers.
Managing these Himalayan rivers is a perpetual strategic challenge. Let's look at the Bees River first. It's one that flows entirely within India.
Where does it originate, and what's its course?
The Bees starts way up near Rohtang Pass in Himachal Pradesh, at an altitude of about 4,000 meters. Historically, it's known as Vipasa in the Vedic texts. It flows through Kulu, Mandi, and Kangra before entering the Punjab plains, where it eventually meets the Satluj at Hariki.
The Satluj, though, is a much larger trans-Himalayan river.
It's an entirely different beast. It originates much farther away, deep in western Tibet, near the Mansarovar Rakhistal Lakes, at an altitude of over 4,500 meters. In Tibet, they call it Lankan Zagbo.
And it carves its way through the entire Himalayan range.
It does, cutting these incredibly deep gorges, which is what gives it such immense hydroelectric potential. It enters India through the Shipkila Pass on the Tibet-Himachal border.
And once it hits the plains, its destiny is tied to the Bees.
Their confluence at Harik is a crucial geographical point. The Satluj then continues southwest into Pakistan, where it eventually merges with the Indus. These rivers are critical for agriculture, but their current volatility, which is driven by intense monsoons, glacial melt, and those mini cloudbursts we talked about, makes managing them a massive, ongoing engineering challenge.
Speaking of engineering challenges, let's talk about a major infrastructure project in the Northeast, the Bairabi-Sairang railway line. This sounds like a massive feat designed to tackle the isolation of Mizoram.
This project is absolutely strategic infrastructure. The primary goal was to give Mizoram's capital, Aizawl, direct rail connectivity for the very first time.
And this connects to broader government policies.
It aligns perfectly with two major initiatives: the Act East policy for better integration with Southeast Asia, and the Domestic Transformation of Northeast, or TONE program.
The route itself is pretty short, just over 51 kilometers, but the terrain made it incredibly complex. Can you detail the scale of that engineering effort?
It was an immense undertaking. We're talking about highly unstable mountainous terrain. The 51-kilometer broad gauge line connects Bairabi on the Assam border to Sairang, near Aizawl. And to navigate that short distance, they had to build 48 tunnels.
48 tunnels.
48, totaling nearly 13 kilometers. So about a quarter of the entire route is underground. On top of that, you have 55 major bridges and 87 minor ones.
And there's one bridge in particular, bridge number 196, that really puts the scale of this into perspective.
Bridge 196 is the crowning achievement of the project. It stands 104 meters tall.
Wow.
To give you a reference point, that is 42 meters taller than the Qutb Minar. Building a stable, high-speed rail bridge across a gorge that deep in a seismically active zone requires just top-tier precision engineering.
So what is the tangible impact for the people of Mizoram now that this link is finally established?
The impact will be immediate and transformative, especially for logistics. Road transport in the hills is slow, it's expensive. Rail connectivity is going to drastically reduce logistics costs, which will directly lower the price of essential goods in the state.
And beyond just goods.
It improves freight for crucial supplies, it will boost trade and tourism, and maybe most importantly, it gives the citizens of Mizoram faster, more reliable access to essential services, to higher education across the country, finally linking the capital directly to the rest of India.
What a breadth of material we've covered. We went from the community-led triumph of the Debrigar Tiger Reserve to the global governance of the Kigali Amendment, fighting those potent, short-lived climate pollutants. We contrasted that with the acute danger of mini cloud bursts and the structural challenges of the green energy paradox. And finally, we explored ancient history with the phytosaur fossil and the future of healthcare from the red ivy plant.
The sources really do paint a picture where progress is fragmented but still incredibly significant. I think it shows that while these monumental global challenges like climate change dominate the conversation, our most immediate, tangible gains often come from hyper-localized, highly specialized solutions.
Whether it's the governance of a dark sky reserve or isolating one compound from a plant.
Exactly. Success seems to hinge on our ability to take these big universal mandates and apply them through detailed, accountable, micro-level strategies. It's about marrying the global governance of Montreal with the localized action of ICAP, or the strategic investment in something like a domestic recycling ecosystem.
And that brings us back to the central economic struggle of the green transition. We've seen India is aggressively building renewables, but it has 44 gigawatts of clean capacity stranded because the reliable storage needed pushes the final price up to maybe 9 rupees per unit, 3 times the cost of coal.
Which brings us to our final thought for you, the listener. If we know that the cost of reliable green power is prohibitive today, can India's goal of becoming a green energy leader by 2047 be achieved just by waiting for some technological breakthrough to slash storage costs? Or must the current regulatory and financing structures, which are so focused on subsidizing generation, be radically overhauled to actually guarantee consumption and finally unlock that existing 44 gigablue of capacity? That's the structural question facing the energy transition, not just in India, but globally.
Welcome back. We got absolutely slammed with source material this month, covering, well, everything from complex constitutional battles to fungal contamination and the future of quantum computing. So we've boiled it all down for you. This is the Strategic High Retention Revision Guide.
That's right. Our listener, the learner, provided us with this enormous stack, and they have 2 very distinct, very strategic goals. First, they need that rapid-fire factual recall for initial assessments, the kind of essential knowledge you just have to know cold.
Right.
Second, and this is maybe more important, they need deep analytical points, the high-impact value-add concepts that can transform a mediocre essay into a top-scoring analysis.
Our mission today is to turn that raw data into highly applicable knowledge. We need to infuse this checklist with the context, the connections, and those critical aha moments that really make a fact stick in your memory. So here's the structure for you. We are starting with what we're calling the prelims cheat sheet, a rapid but deep review of 7 crucial facts. We're spanning geography, conservation, and law, and giving you the necessary background significance for each point.
And then we make a strategic pivot. We're moving into the 4 mains value adds. This is where the real analytical work happens. We will show you how to leverage specific concepts like a radical new WhatsApp governance model or next-generation material science to build powerful evidence-backed arguments.
On all those critical themes, right? Security, governance, environment.
Exactly. This isn't just about listing facts. It's about strategically applying them.
Okay, let's unpack this immediately and dive right into section 1, the prelims cheat sheet. We need high retention facts, and we're starting with a fantastic story of conservation success. Fact number 1, a major conservation landmark. The Debrigar Wildlife Sanctuary in western Odisha recently received the coveted approval from the National Tiger Conservation Authority, the NTCA. It's now officially India's newest tiger reserve. That's the headline. But what makes Debrigar not just another reserve, but a success model worth studying and remembering?
Well, what stands out here and why Debrigar is really a model for the future of conservation in India is that it is fundamentally a community achievement.
Okay.
This was not a forced relocation or some top-down mandate. The achievement hinged on a community integration model where, and this is the key number, 400 families voluntarily relocated from the core area.
Voluntarily. That's always the sticking point in conservation, the human-animal conflict. If the relocation was voluntary, how on earth did the government and the community manage that trust-building process?
It speaks to meticulous planning and, I think, really effective communication. Historically, conservation projects have often failed because the rehabilitation packages were insufficient or the delivery was delayed.
So people lose faith in the system.
They lose faith, exactly. The Debrigar model ensured timely compensation, access to land for relocation, and all the essential infrastructure in the new settlements. This transformation of the local population, from people who might conflict with forest management into active conservation partners who now guard the edges of the park and benefit from ecotourism, that is the real policy takeaway here.
Right. It proves that a voluntary, comprehensive rehab program actually works better than forced displacement.
It works so much better.
Beyond the social model, what's unique about the environment itself? What should we be highlighting in, say, a geography answer?
Ecologically, it contains a highly resilient and unique ecosystem. The term to remember is an amphiterrestrial habitat.
Okay, break that down for us.
Sure. Amphi means dual, and terrestrial means land. It's an area that seamlessly integrates 3 distinct biomes. You've got dense, deciduous forests, significant grasslands, and crucially, vast water resources.
And that mix makes it more resilient.
Incredibly resilient, especially to the immediate pressures of climate change. And that water element is critical because the reserve incorporates the Hirakud wetland. And that's not just any wetland. It's already designated as a Ramsar site, a wetland of international importance.
Oh, so we have a multi-layered conservation shield. You've got a new tiger reserve layered right on top of a pre-existing Ramsar site, which just confirms its ecological sanctity.
Exactly. And there's one other layer of significance that's increasingly relevant globally. Debrigar has been developed as India's first dark sky tourism hub.
Dark sky tourism. So
Oh.
less light pollution, better stargazing.
Precisely. The authorities have actively minimized light pollution, creating facilities specifically for deep sky observation and astrophotography. It's a very modern, specialized form of ecotourism. It draws a different, often high-value clientele, which ties conservation directly back to a sustainable economic stream for the local communities that stayed.
That intersection of hard conservation, water management, and specialized ecotourism. It's a powerful, multifaceted case study. Okay, moving on. Let's tackle constitutional law. Fact number 2 deals with a major ongoing review.
Yes.
The constitutional conundrum regarding Article 30 and the right to education, or RTE exemption.
The core constitutional fact to really nail down here is that Article 30 grants specific educational rights for minorities, both religious and linguistic, to establish and administer educational institutions of their choice.
And the key legal precedent.
That would be the Pramadan Educational and Cultural Trust case from 2014. It delivered a really landmark ruling.
And what did that 2014 ruling actually cement? What was the outcome?
It confirmed that the principle of institutional autonomy was so strong that it exempted all minority schools. And that includes both those receiving government aid and those that are completely unaided, from the compulsory 25% reservation quota requirement under the Right to Education Act.
So the court at the time saw the RTE quota as interfering with the minority community's right to run their own institutions.
That was the logic, yes.
So the president established a near-complete immunity for minority institutions from the core inclusion provisions of the RTE. Why is the Supreme Court actively reviewing this now? What's changed?
Well, they are tasked with a very difficult harmonization exercise. The current court is trying to find a working balance between two fundamental constitutional principles. On one hand, you have Article 30, the right to autonomy, and on the other, Article 21A, the fundamental right to inclusive education.
And the conflict is intensely practical, I imagine.
It is. The blanket exemption established by that 2014 ruling has been very heavily criticized. The perception is that it dilutes the spirit of inclusion that the entire RTE Act was built upon.
And isn't the political reality here that many established, elite, non-minority institutions have actively sought minority status, specifically to bypass the RTE quota, essentially using Article 30 as a kind of legal loophole?
That's precisely the policy dilemma. Many schools are seeking minority status solely to avoid the financial and administrative burden of the 25% socioeconomic mixing in their classrooms.
Which completely undermines the inclusive goals of the RTE.
It does. And this is why the judicial rebalancing is so vital. The goal isn't necessarily to remove Article 30, but the future ruling must clearly articulate that institutional autonomy cannot equate to immunity from guaranteeing fundamental child-centric standards.
This sounds like the court is trying to legislate new standards from the bench. Isn't there a risk of administrative overreach when they start mandating things like teacher qualification norms or essential infrastructure for private schools, even if they are minority institutions?
That's a very important challenge to raise. The judiciary is attempting to define the reasonable restrictions on fundamental rights. They aren't trying to override Article 30 entirely. Rather, they want to ensure that the autonomy it provides doesn't allow for a total erosion of quality standards for the children receiving education there. They are essentially saying, you have the right to establish and administer, but that administration must meet the minimum quality bar set for all educational institutions.
And that's why this is such a big deal.
A huge deal. This is why the Chief Justice referred the matter to a much larger bench, because the Pramati case was a Constitution bench ruling, and only a bench of equal or greater size can review or overturn it. It just confirms the enormous importance of this legal reform.
Right. Moving from law to geography. Fact number 3, the Musi River. We often discuss the massive national river systems, but these regional urban rivers like the Musi are often more critical to the daily life and infrastructure of our major cities.
Absolutely. The core fact to remember is that the Musi River is a crucial tributary of the Krishna River, one of the 4 great river systems of the Deccan Plateau. Its origin is in the Anantagiri Hills, near Vikarabad in Telangana.
And its urban connection to Hyderabad is just inescapable. It's the lifeblood, and historically the very reason for the city's existence, isn't it?
It is absolutely fundamental. The Musi shaped Hyderabad's development, providing water and defining the settlement pattern. But its greatest historical significance lies in the hydrological infrastructure that was built upon it.
You're talking about after the Great Flood.
Exactly. After the devastating 1908 Great Flood of the Musi, which caused just massive destruction, the Nizams commissioned flood control measures. This led directly to the creation of the twin reservoirs that remain major water sources for the city to this day, Osman Sagar and Himayat Sagar.
You know, I think we often forget that urban planning is essentially applied geography. The creation of those twin lakes was a perfect example of adaptive planning.
It really was. They were built as reservoirs to supply drinking water to Hyderabad and Secunderabad, but their primary initial function was flood control, holding back the Musi's monsoon waters.
But today the story is different.
Very different. Today, the river faces severe encroachment and pollution challenges as it flows through the metropolitan area. This leads to cyclical flooding issues all over again. So the current news context is often about removing those encroachments and reviving the river, which just underscores its ongoing relevance to the city's future sustainability. It's a classic example of that tension between historical hydrological necessity and modern, sprawling urban development.
Next, we hit global climate policy. Fact number 4, the Kigali Amendment. What's the precise rapid-fire definition here that we need to recall instantly?
The Kigali Amendment is an international agreement operating under the umbrella of the Montreal Protocol. Now, this is a crucial detail. While the Montreal Protocol originally focused on ozone-depleting substances.
Right, CFCs and all that.
Yes. Kigali specifically targets the phase-down of the production and consumption of hydrofluorocarbons, or HFCs.
Why is this distinction so crucial? Because HFCs aren't actually ozone depleters, are they?
No, they're not. They were introduced as replacements for ozone-depleting substances, but we quickly realized HFCs are incredibly potent greenhouse gases. While they are a tiny fraction of total emissions, their global warming potential, their GWP, can be thousands of times higher than CO2.
Wow.
So Kigali is a powerful climate change measure being implemented under an environmental treaty that was originally focused on ozone. That nuance is golden.
That makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
So how does this massive international commitment link directly to India's domestic policy and the growing necessity of cooling?
It connects directly to India's India Cooling Action Plan, ICFP, of 2019. This is India's roadmap to align with Kigali's goals. The ICFP aims to dramatically cut cooling demand by 20 to 25% by the year 2037-38.
And this isn't just about reducing emissions. It's about cooling shifting from an infrastructural convenience to a major national security and public health concern.
That's the key insight. Cooling demand is just soaring because global temperatures are rising, making extreme heat a systemic threat.
Exactly. And the extreme heat requires real-world policy intervention, which we are now seeing reflected in state-level governance.
We are. The necessity for public health protection means that heat action plans, HAPs, have now been adopted by 23 states. These plans involve early warnings, cooling centers, and critical labor protections. A necessary granular rule, for instance, is Telangana's mandate for midday breaks for construction workers during peak summer heat. This shows policy translating into specific enforceable labor law to protect the most vulnerable workers.
It links the Kigali Amendment directly to a construction site in Hyderabad.
Incredible.
Okay. Fact number 5 takes us from high policy to a hidden agricultural threat: aflatoxin contamination. This is a very specific but high-impact topic for trade.
Aflatoxins are toxic secondary metabolites. They're essentially metabolic byproducts produced by two specific types of fungi, Aspergillus flavus and Aspergillus parasiticus. They are environmental opportunists. They thrive in hot, humid climates and are notorious for contaminating major crops like groundnuts, maize, and spices.
Often before they're even harvested.
Yes, if conditions are poor.
What was the recent immediate economic consequence that brought this into the news cycle?
The immediate consequence was a major trade disruption. Indonesia suspended groundnut imports from India due to contamination concerns. This is a critical signal that illustrates exactly why aflatoxin contamination is such a significant non-tariff trade barrier.
I know importing regions, especially the EU, have notoriously strict standards. Can you give us an idea of just how strict those limits are?
Oh, they are brutally strict. Importing countries impose extremely low tolerance limits. For example, the European Union limits the presence of aflatoxin B1 in peanuts to less than or equal to 4 micrograms per kilogram.
4 micrograms per kilogram. That's an almost undetectable amount.
It is. If those limits are breached, the entire consignment is rejected. This leads to massive financial losses for exporters, impacting the balance sheets of both traders and ultimately small farmers.
And it's not just an economic or trade risk, it's a profound public health concern because aflatoxins are powerful carcinogens.
Precisely. Beyond liver cancer and immunosuppression, there's a specific risk related to the food chain. When cattle consume contaminated feed, like maize or groundnut cake, they metabolize the toxin into something called aflatoxin M1.
M1.
And M1 then enters the milk supply. This poses a particular health risk for infants and lactating mothers who rely on dairy. So aflatoxin contamination connects agricultural policy, international trade law, and fundamental public health monitoring under one single fungal threat.
Finally, in this rapid review, fact number 6 covers space science. Astrosat.
Astrosat is a definitive point of pride for India's indigenous space program. It is the country's first dedicated multi-wavelength space astronomy observatory. It was launched successfully back in 2015 by the very reliable PSLV C-30 rocket.
What is the unique selling proposition of Astrosat? I mean, why is it globally significant compared to, say, Hubble or the James Webb?
Its core importance, its real unique capability, lies in its ability to enable simultaneous multi-band observations of celestial objects.
Okay, what does that mean in practice?
Think of it this way. When you look at an object in space, different processes emit light at different wavelengths. A hot gas cloud might emit X-rays, while a cool dust ring might emit visible or infrared light. Astrosat can look at a single phenomenon, say, matter spiraling into a black hole, across 5 different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum, all at the same time.
So it's like seeing the same event in 5 different colors simultaneously, which gives you a much richer, more comprehensive scientific picture.
Exactly. This capability gives it a unique edge, especially in transient astronomy. The satellite has contributed significantly to global research on highly energetic phenomena like active black holes, rapidly spinning neutron stars, and the dynamics of galaxy mergers. It really firmly establishes India's indigenous capacity in space-based astronomical research, moving us beyond just relying on data from international partners.
We've covered a really dense set of facts there, from constitutional battles over education and the unique geology of the Musi River to future semiconductor materials and high-stakes agricultural trade risks. That concludes our prelims cheat sheet. Now let's pivot hard into the deep analysis section. Section 2, the mains value adds. This is where we show you how to shift from knowing facts to strategically using concepts.
Exactly. This section is entirely focused on maximizing the impact and the analytical depth of your long-form answers. We're going to focus on framing major national themes with specific policy-relevant examples drawn directly from the sources.
Let's start with strategic argument number 1, women empowerment. We have a powerful quote that should anchor any essay on gender and development. We cannot have a Viksit Bharat with a motherhood penalty. How do we apply that concept effectively in Ami's answer?
You use that quote as the thesis statement. It's the hook to introduce the systemic economic challenges that women face when they enter the phase of primary caregiving. The motherhood penalty is the measurable economic and career disadvantage women suffer compared to their male counterparts, or even to childless women.
And the key is to back that up with data immediately.
Immediately, you follow that abstract concept with hard, quantifiable evidence showing exactly where this penalty manifests economically.
And where does our source material point?
It points specifically to the burgeoning green energy sector, which is meant to be the future engine of India's growth. Yet the data shows that women hold only 11% of rooftop solar jobs.
11%. That's a devastatingly effective data point because it proves that women are being systematically excluded from the high-growth, future-ready sectors that are supposed to define a modern, developed nation.
It proves it in black and white.
What are the barriers here? Is it just social, or are there structural policy gaps keeping that number so low?
Oh, it's highly structural. It's a mix of skill gaps, a lack of targeted vocational training for women in technical trades, and very real infrastructural gaps. For example, a rooftop solar installer job often requires working away from home, manual labor, and inconsistent hours.
All things that directly conflict with the unpaid care burden and, say, a lack of safe, flexible transportation options for women.
You've got it. Until those training, cultural, and logistical barriers are addressed, that 11% figure will remain static and the motherhood penalty will persist, despite all the rhetoric of development.
It covers the economic dimension.
Yeah.
Let's move to the legal and social mechanism dimension, specifically this idea of judicial experimentalism concerning domestic cruelty laws.
This takes us into the very complex area of institutional integrity and preventing legal misuse. We have to look at the heated debate around Section 498A, the domestic cruelty law. The Supreme Court's attempt to introduce a kind of judicial balance was highlighted by its endorsement of a mandatory cooling period in the Shivangi Bansal versus Sahib Bansal case in 2025.
A cooling period. What is the rationale behind a mandatory delay in a domestic violence case?
The court is essentially trying to mandate a period of mediation or conciliation before a formal police action or trial proceeds. The primary goal is to prevent the alleged misuse of Section 498A in marital disputes that might not, in the court's view, truly meet the high threshold for cruelty.
But this has sparked huge controversy.
Huge, because it risks delaying a victim's right to prompt, swift justice.
So the argument is that while preventing legal misuse is essential, mandating a delay potentially compromises the victim's safety and dignity by forcing them to stay in a volatile environment for longer.
Exactly. It shows the judiciary is actively experimenting. They're trying to balance institutional integrity with fundamental rights, but that process itself generates these new tensions around ensuring dignity and swift recourse for vulnerable women. You use this case to show that legal mechanisms are complex and constantly evolving under judicial pressure.
To counter these systemic and legal challenges, we need successful models. Can we highlight the positive role of NGOs in grassroots empowerment using our source material?
Absolutely. The perfect case study here is the NGO Educate Girls, founded by Safina Hussain, which deservedly won the 2025 Ramon Magsaysay Award. This organization provides a gold standard blueprint for community mobilization and breaking the cycle of illiteracy.
What specific strategy makes their model so powerful? It's their retention rate, isn't it?
Yes, that's the key. They don't just focus on enrollment, they focus on retention. They operate across 30,000 villages, and their goal is not just to identify out-of-school girls, but to make sure they stay in school.
How do they do that?
They achieve this through local champions, volunteers trained to visit homes, counsel parents, and conduct non-formal education sessions to bridge any learning gaps. Their impact is massive, benefiting over 2 million girls, and their retention rate is astonishingly high. It exceeds 90%.
Over 90%.
That figure is key. It shows that breaking the cycle of illiteracy requires focused, high-retention efforts backed by genuine community ownership, not just one-time enrollment drives.
That flows seamlessly into our second strategic argument, which addresses governance. Here we're using the case study of Andhra Pradesh's digital delivery system, ManaMitra.
The thesis here is that ManaMitra isn't just another digitized process. It is a perfect case study for truly citizen-centric governance. It leverages simple, ubiquitous technology to demolish bureaucratic barriers. The goal is to move the government from an intimidating physical office structure to a service that fits literally in the palm of the citizen's hand.
Lay out the mechanism of delivery for us. How does a single WhatsApp number translate into reliable, accountable governance?
The mechanism is built on simplicity and reach. Citizens only need a single, dedicated WhatsApp number, 955-230-00009. They use a menu-driven chatbot interface to instantly request essential official documents like income, caste, or residence certificates. This is radical because it bypasses physical offices, the need for long queues, and critically, the opportunity for intermediaries or middlemen to demand bribes.
Okay, but digital documents are easily counterfeited. How does ManaMitra tackle the trust and transparency issue? That seems like the biggest hurdle.
That is the core innovation they introduced. The digital documents delivered back to the citizen are not just PDFs. They are immediately embedded with QR code verification. When scanned, that QR code links the document directly back to the official government database records. This feature essentially eliminates counterfeiting and builds public trust in state processes. The authenticity of the document can be verified instantly by any entity, a bank, a university, an employer.
If this model is demonstrably successful at delivering transparent, fraud-resistant services, how do we turn ManaMitra into a robust blueprint for national replication? What are the key legislative and technological requirements?
We need to institutionalize this success. The pathway involves, I'd say, 3 main strategic requirements. First and foremost is strengthening cybersecurity. as sensitive data is now flowing instantly through a private platform like WhatsApp.
Which is a huge risk.
A massive risk. We need to introduce mandatory two-factor authentication and, crucially, look at things like blockchain-backed verification for certificates to protect against data breaches and repudiation.
Okay, that's protecting the system itself. What about improving the service delivery?
Second, we need expanded AI integration. The current system is menu-driven, which is great, but future integration must involve more complex, predictive service delivery. For instance, proactively calculating a citizen's eligibility for a scheme and then prompting them to apply. And more urgently, the AI needs crucial multilingual support to bridge the literacy and language gaps across our diverse states. If a citizen can only read a local script, the AI must deliver the service in that language instantly.
And the final point, institutional backing.
Yes. The third requirement is providing formal legislative backing. Right now, the service often functions under an administrative order. For it to be truly durable, we need a legal framework that institutionalizes this digital delivery, defining service standards and ensuring accountability. This solidifies ManaMitra not as some administrative whim, but as a formal, scalable national asset, potentially integrating into the broader architecture of DigiLocker and Cohen.
That shifts us perfectly into technology and security, a theme we touched upon earlier. Strategic argument number 3. The idea that semiconductors are the new oil. You can't just state this. You need to justify the thesis strategically for India.
The justification is foundational and it's geopolitical. Semiconductors are the choke point technology of the 21st century. They underpin every single aspect of modern strategic capacity, from sophisticated civilian AI infrastructure and advanced computing to modern defense systems and the burgeoning electric vehicle industry.
To control semiconductors is to control the future economy and military capabilities.
It is. And India's massive national goals, like the $5 trillion economy or becoming a global manufacturing hub, are entirely constrained by this resource gap. Our national goals are severely constrained by major infrastructure gaps, specifically compute infrastructure shortfalls, and the well-documented persistent GPU shortages necessary for high-end AI processing.
And we're seeing a global geopolitical struggle over these chips. If we rely entirely on external supply chains, India's strategic autonomy is compromised, especially given the concentration of advanced manufacturing in volatile regions like Taiwan.
That's the heart of the matter.
So if conventional silicon is the old path, and one that is heavily controlled by established players, what is India's proposed strategic countermeasure to overcome that reliance?
The strategic answer lies in the leapfrog strategy. This means prioritizing 2D materials. This is India's bet on the next generation of material science to bypass our reliance on conventional silicon architecture. We are talking about materials like graphene, which is a single layer of carbon atoms, and molybdenum disulfide, or text MOS2.
Okay, we need to slow down on this point. What makes these materials physically revolutionary? How do they fundamentally change computing?
Their characteristics are phenomenal. Firstly, they are truly single atom, thick, far thinner than current transistor gates, meaning chips can be infinitely smaller and denser. Secondly, they exhibit extraordinary electronic properties. They are superconductors. Because the electrons are confined to a single plane, they scatter less, meaning they carry electricity with almost zero resistance and minimal energy loss.
Less energy loss means less heat, making devices faster and far more power efficient.
Exactly. And they also conduct heat horizontally very effectively.
That addresses the efficiency and size problem, but why are they being called quantum ready?
Because of the precise control you have over their properties. Their energy gap can be manipulated or tuned. This allows them to create the exact stable environment needed to host and manipulate quantum bits, or qubits, for future quantum computing architectures. They are the ideal platform for both miniaturization and the quantum transition.
And they're strong.
Incredibly super strong, up to 200 times stronger than steel, yet they remain flexible, which opens the door for a whole new world of flexible electronics.
So the security implication moves far beyond just consumer electronics. This is about geopolitical power and securing the military and AI supply chain for the future.
It is absolutely about sovereignty. Developing this domestic 2D material capacity shifts India's global position. It moves India from being primarily a chip assembly or fabrication nation reliant on foreign IP to a product nation and a true driver of fundamental innovation. Securing this domestic supply chain provides the kind of economic sovereignty you just cannot achieve when relying on external silicon sources.
Finally, strategic argument number 4 addresses environment and health. the absolute necessity of the One Health approach.
The core thesis here is that modern global crises cannot be solved by working in traditional silos. You simply cannot tackle antimicrobial resistance, or AMR, or the rising tide of zoonotic diseases by having human health, animal health, and environmental health departments operating separately. The One Health approach demands immediate and structural integration.
Give us the evidence from zoonotic diseases that proves this integration is necessary.
We can use the source material on Mpox, which was formerly monkeypox. Mpox is a viral zoonotic disease caused by the orthopox virus. The transmission pathway perfectly demonstrates the failure of siloed management. The disease lives in animal reservoirs, primarily rodents and some primates. It jumps to humans, that's the spillover, via consumption, bites, or close contact in endemic regions. Then, once established in humans, it spreads from human to human.
So if you only treat the human cases, you're ignoring the animal reservoir where it will just jump back into the human population. And if you only monitor the animals, you ignore the environmental interaction that facilitates the jump in the first place.
Precisely. Effective management requires cross-sectoral management, wildlife surveillance, rapid human public health preparedness, and monitoring environmental changes like habitat destruction that force animals and humans into closer proximity. The interconnectedness is undeniable.
And what about the environmental reservoirs themselves? How does the quality of our soil and water immediately dictate human health risk, even without a clear animal intermediary?
This is where we look at opportunistic environmental pathogens like acanthamoeba. This organism exists naturally in environmental sources like fresh water, soil, and air, especially if they are warm and contaminated. Acanthamoeba can cause severe keratitis, a painful and vision-threatening eye infection, especially in contact lens users, or, if it's inhaled, the often fatal brain swelling known as granulomatous amoebic encephalitis.
What makes this organism so resilient in the environment? Why is it so hard to get rid of?
It exists in two forms. There's the active form, the trophozoite, and then there's the highly resistant dormant form, the cyst. The cyst form is incredibly durable and resistant to many standard disinfectants and environmental stresses. The fact that a pathogen existing naturally in basic environmental components, water and soil, directly causes severe human outcomes underlines that environmental quality is human health policy.
Which means we have to integrate climate and environment warnings with public health preparedness. Can you stress the policy need using a current climate phenomenon?
We must stress the integration of climate disaster warnings with disease surveillance. For example, the IMD has recently focused on a rising trend in localized high-intensity events. They're now terming mini cloudbursts.
Mini cloudbursts, how are those defined?
They're defined by their intensity. 5 centimeters or more of rainfall per hour over a very small area, say 20 to 30 square kilometers.
And these events are devastating for infrastructure, particularly in the hills.
They cause flash floods and infrastructure collapse, yes. But from a public health perspective, flash floods immediately mix sewage, clean water supplies, and contaminated soil. This creates massive breeding grounds and dispersal pathways for opportunistic environmental pathogens like acanthamoeba and all sorts of waterborne bacteria. Therefore, a warning about an imminent mini cloudburst should trigger not just an infrastructure warning, but also a specific, immediate public health preparedness alert for waterborne and environmental infections. That is the essence of One Health in action.
We've covered a remarkable amount of ground, from specific geological origins and the political economy of the Musi River to the legal complexity of constitutional amendments, the future of 2D material science, and these integrated public health models.
It has been an intensely strategic synthesis. We started with the rapid-fire facts, that constitutional tension over Article 30 and the Pramati case, the conservation triumph and dark sky model of Debrigar, and the Kigali HFC phase-down linking climate action directly to specific labor rules in states like Telangana. We then moved into the strategic mains analysis, demonstrating how to use economic data, like that alarming 11% women's participation in rooftop solar jobs, to substantiate the motherhood penalty argument. We showed how the ManaMitra system provides a crucial legislative blueprint for next-generation governance, and how 2D materials offer a strategic security bypass for the semiconductors are the new oil geopolitical thesis. We've connected all these dots to make the facts memorable and applicable.
The density of that summary is exactly what the learner needs.
That's your September 2025 sorted. Short, sharp, and exam-ready. If this high-retention format helped you, and if you are capable, please click Join below. Your membership ensures we can keep creating these quality summaries for everyone. Thanks to our paid members for fueling this channel. Everyone else, like, subscribe, and comment below. Which mnemonic did you like the best? This is Simplified UPSC by PPP. Revise smart, stay consistent. Jai Hind.
Before we close out, let's leave you with one final provocative thought that connects everything we've discussed. From the rigidity of constitutional law to the fluidity of cutting-edge technology and global security strategy.
We did just chart the future of material science and securing India's strategic compute capacity a moment ago.
Exactly. We charted the collision of the Indian and Eurasian plates that created the geologically young and fragile Himalayas, and we discussed the technological collision of 2D materials that could define the next century of computing and global security. When thinking about India's growing space economy and its strategic capacity, remember the SSLV, the Small Satellite Launch Vehicle?
The SSLV. It's designed to be affordable, quick turnaround, and demand-driven for the burgeoning small satellite market globally.
Correct. And ISRO recently signed its 100th technology transfer for the commercial production of the SSLV with Hindustan Aeronautics Limited, or HAL. This is a massive shift towards commercialization and indigenous scaled production in space technology. So here is our question for you, for the learner, linking this domestic technical proliferation back to global security. How does the transfer of technology for affordable, quick turnaround SSLV production, a core piece of India's space economy, affect India's ability to engage with multilateral export control regimes like the Wassenaar arrangement, which is currently struggling to regulate the fast-moving dual-use nature of digital and cyber technologies?
That's a fascinating tension, domestic commercial interest versus international control norms. A great question to keep you thinking about the geopolitics of space.
We'll be back soon to unpack your next stack of sources. Stay curious.